Chapter 826 Devouring the Wisdom Dictator, Entering the Ancestral Land. Tilde. Yunshan let out a scream, and in an instant, his skin was ripped apart. Even though he was already a wisdom dictator, he still found the new wounds difficult to heal. That was because the willow branches also contained the power of a wisdom dictator. Both Nanan and Dragon moved around fluidly as they continuously whipped Yunshan with the willow branches. They moved so fast that they had become a blur. Everyone watching the unfolding of the abuse began to shudder as if they were the ones getting whipped. This. They were so shocked that they were at a loss for words. They could only stare blankly, for they had lost the ability to process anything. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that Yunshan wasn't a wisdom dictator at all. This is too terrifying to watch. I'm shocked to my very core. I wouldn't have believed this if I didn't see it with my own eyes. They're actually winning. Hooray! We're saved. It's a miracle. A miracle has been granted to us. Nanan and Dragon had done the impossible, winning against a wisdom dictator. Yunshan suddenly let out a long, furious roar, and the mana all over his body surged like a tsunami, giving him the push he needed to break away from Nanan and Dragon. At that moment, his distorted face was completely drenched in his own blood. Yunshan stared at Dragon and Nanan with his bloodshot eyes. His murderous intent was so thick that it manifested as a cloud of red mist around him. It was a terrifying force that made the sky tremble. This ends here. He pressed the fiery red wings on his forehead and the flaming wings shot up to the sky like a phoenix. The fallen god bow appeared in front of him and he pulled the bowstring to its limit. Die. 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 Yunshan smiled savagely at the thought of Nanan and Dragon's inevitable death. He poured all his power into the fallen god bow to unleash all of its potential. The world went silent. He was confident that this arrow would send Nanan and Dragon to death's door. Everyone present was holding their breaths and watching intently with their hearts in their throats. Imagine their surprise when before their very eyes, the fallen god bow deflated like a balloon and disappeared in a blink of an eye. It happened so fast that Yunshan remained locked in his bowstring pulling stance for a while. His eyes widened in confusion when he finally realized the bow was gone. "Where did it go?" screamed Yunshan shrilly. He began to question whether he was awake or dreaming. He looked at Nanan and Dragon and asked fearfully, "Who are you people exactly?" Whack. 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 He got his reply in the form of 2 willow branches. The same abuse rained down incessantly on him. The Yun chief could not believe what he was seeing. What happened? The fallen god bow was the power of the Yun clan's bloodline. It was their strongest ultimate move inspired by their bloodline, and it could easily shoot down opponents of the same level. How could it have failed? How was it possible that in one moment, Yunshan was pulling the bow cockily, and in the next, he wilted into nothingness? No one could possibly expect them to have processed the whole thing. The fallen god bow must have sensed that the willow branches came from one of the 7 battle spirit guardians. Hence, it wouldn't attack them, explained Cultivator Junjun. That must be it, said the Yun chief with a nod. Very quickly, the mighty and powerful wisdom dictator was rendered to nothing but a fleshy pulp by Nanan and Dragon. Even at that state, he managed to remain cocky. "Ha ha ha, you'll never be able to kill me. I'm a wisdom dictator." "Is that so?" said Nanan with an innocent smile. Then, her face turned cold as the aura swirling around her became domineering. Demon devouring. A black mist surged out of her and shrouded Yunshan. "It's useless. A half-step wisdom dictator like you can never obliterate me." Yunshan smiled disdainfully, but in the next moment, the smile froze on his face. "Gah! My power. This is impossible. My power's being devoured. Ah! What kind of spell is this?" He panicked and tried to resist being devoured, but it was to no avail. He could only helplessly stand there as his power and origins of life flowed out of his body. Nanan's power instantly skyrocketed after devouring Yunshan's power, and her aura became extremely unstable. The black mist rose and fell like a tide. It was a good 5 minutes before she managed to get the power under control. She opened her eyes, revealing a glint of unprecedented power in them. A little more and she would have become a real wisdom dictator. Nanan grinned at Dragon and said proudly, "Hee, I'm stronger than you now." Dragon pouted and said, "Humph, what's the big deal? Just wait and see." The two of them had a love-hate relationship. Sometimes, they even competed to see who ate the most. By then, all the dust had settled. Yun Xiaolong finally relaxed. He ran over to where the Yun clan people were and asked, "Chief, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I must say, Xiaolong, that the reinforcements you brought are awesome. said the Yun chief. "Chief, what you saw was just the tip of the iceberg," said Yun Xiaolong reverently. Only those who had experienced what he had could truly understand just how monstrously powerful Nanan and the others were, so monstrously powerful that it defied all imagination. "By the way, I'm afraid that chaos would descend upon us now that Yun Kong and the others have entered the ancestral land," said the Yun chief in a panic. Yes, there was a saying from the ancestral teachings. If the ancestral land is open, heaven and earth will fall. Our Yun clan will be the sinners of the ages if that really happens, said another old man. "Let's go now. Maybe we can still stop them." They were just about to take a step toward the door but were immediately stopped by the Heavenly Palace people. "Dear fellow Taoists of the Yun clan, your mana has been sealed. Going there in your current condition is like courting death, so you should leave this matter to us," said Yang Jing. "That's right. Besides, we still have to get the fallen god bow, so wait for us here," said Nanan. The Yun chief gave it some thought. Then, he sincerely said, "Then let me thank you on behalf of the Yun clan. We'll never forget your great kindness and virtue." Then, without delay, Nanan, Dragon, and the Heavenly Palace people stepped into the ancestral land while the rest of the heavenly soldiers and heavenly guards stayed to help the Yun clan break the seal on their mana. Stepping into the ancestral land was like entering another space. The ground was made up from a deposit of loess while the sky was pitch black, making the whole world seem desolate. However, one should not judge a book by its cover, for the place was filled with miraculously thick spiritual chi and wisdom. Their hearts began to thump wildly against their chests when they felt an inexplicable power looming over them. Under their feet was a narrow and long road that stretched far beyond their field of vision. Nanan and the others cautiously walked forward, and after some distance, they chanced upon a giant frost wolf with its snout deep in a corpse. It was obvious from the fiery red wings on the corpse's forehead that he was one of the Yun clansmen who had entered before them. Chapter 827 will be cheering for you. This is definitely a place of great evil. Xiao Changfeng looked at the giant frost wolf with vigilance. The wolf was a half-step wisdom dictator. To encounter a monster of this caliber not long after they entered just showed how dangerous the ancestral land was, so much so that even the Yun clan who entered before them could not escape from the danger. At that moment, the giant frost wolf slowly turned its head to face them. Its blue eyes seemed to pierce through everyone, giving them the chills. Just when everyone was about to prepare for battle, the giant frost wolf turned its attention back to the corpse. It chomped down on the corpse's head and ran off. Shocked by the unexpectedness of it all, they remained standing where they were for quite a while. "It's making way for us?" asked Yang Jing with uncertainty. The giant frost wolf was in the middle of their path before it had cleared the way for them. "I think the ancestral land's danger is only reserved for outsiders and holds no threat to us," mused Dragon. "Oh, I'm familiar with how this works," said Nanan seriously. The Heavenly Palace people's jaws dropped to the ground, but soon, they accepted the reality of it all. After all, it was not like they had not seen this happen before. Cultivator Junjun cleared his throat and said, "Let's continue on our way." It was just as Dragon postulated. Along the way, they came across many fierce monsters, even one that was close to the level of a wisdom dictator. However, none of the monsters ever attacked them. The road seemed to go on infinitely, and after God knows how long, they arrived at an area shrouded in a violent windstorm. The terrifying wisdom aura raged on wildly, forming a turbulent wind that was strong enough to make a wisdom dictator's blood run cold, strong enough to destroy heaven and earth, and strong enough to rip the space apart into emptiness. The Heavenly Palace people were frightened by what they saw before them. Nanan and Dragon, however, calmly entered the windstorm. The wind dissipated wherever their foot fell. All was well. Cultivator Junjun pursed his lips and said, "It seems like we've been unnecessarily worried." The group continued on their way, and they soon caught up with Yun Kong's group, who were struggling to move forward in the terrifying sea of fire. Countless defensive treasures were suspended mid-air, turning into shields to protect them as they slowly moved forward step by step. Yun Kong's face was solemn. Even he, a wisdom dictator, would perish if he made a wrong move in the sea of fire. The flame used wisdom as fuel, and it could also refine wisdom. No matter what treasure it was, it would definitely lose its power if it stayed in the flames for too long. Similarly, if they stayed there for too long, their wisdom would be burned away until there was nothing left. Just how far does this sea of fire go? It feels like there's no end to this. This is my last defense treasure and my mana is running out. We shouldn't have entered the ancestral land. This place is too dangerous. The overlord has gone through a great expense to keep whatever's hidden here safe, meaning to say that it must be something of immense value. The people of the Yun clan were discussing amongst themselves. Along the way, they had lost half of their manpower, causing them to become deeply afraid of the ancestral land. They knew they would not last much longer even with their spiritual cultivation. The greater the danger, the more opportunities there are. Somewhere in here lies a power that can make us even more powerful than the overlord. So you'd better all shut up. There's no turning back for us now. Yun Kong interrupted everyone's discussion. His words had the effect of bringing up their morale. After all, everything would be worth it once they received the power that would allow them to surpass the overlord. However, this calm did not last long, for they had noticed another group of people not far behind them. Shit. It seems like we're not the only ones here. Do my eyes deceive me? How are they unharmed in the sea of fire? The flames are avoiding them, it's giving them a path. What, how, and why is this happening? Yun Kong frowned slightly. He thought they were talking nonsense. He turned around and was about to give them another scolding, but swallowed back his words when he saw Nanan and the others among the flames. His pupils widened and his eyes almost popped out. How is this possible? Yun Kong stood there in a daze, watching helplessly as Nanan and the others took one step after another toward him. It's the group of people that Yun Xiaolong brought over. How could Yun Shan fail to stop them? And why are they walking around here as if they're taking a stroll in the park? Thought Yun Kong, who was by then plagued with frustration and doubts. Huh? Fancy meeting you here, said Nanan with a smile. Wow, these flames are actually burning you. It looks so fun. Why won't the flames burn us? Cried Dragon enviously. Yun Kong and the others almost vomited blood on the spot. Fun? Do we look like we're having fun? We're in hell right now. Don't worry. Take your time. We'll wait for you at the end, said Yang Jing with a smile. Yes. We'll be cheering for you from the sidelines, said Xiao Chengfeng quickly. In the next moment, Nanan and the others actually stopped in their tracks and took out a bunch of sunflower seeds. They then sat down to enjoy the show put on by Yun Kong and his group. Come on, don't be discouraged, you'll definitely make it across the sea of fire. What are you doing? Your mon is shaking. It's too dangerous like that. You have to keep it under control. Stay steady. Steady, I say. A dark cloud started to form above the heads of Yun Kong and the others. They not only had to endure physical torture but emotional torture as well. Yun Kong's eyes were bloodshot and he was trembling with anger. He was like a furious tiger that wanted to sink its teeth into its enemies. By the time they crossed the sea of fire, their group was short by 5 more members. Then, they found themselves in a world of thunder and lightning. The lightning bolts not only blanketed the sky but the ground as well, while the electric currents writhed in the air like dancing silver snakes. However, it was the same old story. Nanan and the others were unaffected, while Yun Kong and the others were struck again and again by the lightning bolts. Then, they came to an ice world. Yun Kong and the others would not feel as bad if they did not have Nanan and the others as a comparison. Some of the cultivators actually became so depressed by the unfair treatment that they chose to commit suicide. Even Yun Kong was not spared from the roller coaster of emotions. He had been struck so many times that all the hair on his body had been zapped off and his skin was nothing but charred pieces of leather. Yun Kong gritted his teeth and vowed to himself that he would rain down payback on Nanan and the others as soon as he got the ultimate power hidden in the ancestral land. Finally, the terrifying visions in the sky disappeared and everyone arrived in an open field that seemed to go on endlessly. There stood a lonely figure with his hands folded behind his back. He was looking deeply at everyone. A jolt went through the surviving members of the Yun clan as their pupils shrank rapidly when they saw the figure. Isn't that the overlord? Chapter 828 The Overlord's Vestigial Consciousness. Bursts of exclamations could be heard in the depths of the Yun clan's ancestral land, revealing the shock in everyone's heart. Even Yun Kong was quaking in his boots. He almost fell to his knees. They never dreamed that the overlord would actually appear in the ancestral land. Within the Yun clan, there was a portrait of the overlord which they had to observe every day, so it was not surprising they could recognize the figure in front of them at a glance. Their exclamations shocked Yang Jing and the others. The overlord of the Yun clan? That means he's the owner of the fallen god Bo. And the creator of the ancient forbidden area. And the supreme power who sealed heaven. How terrifying his might would be. No, he isn't the overlord, said Yun Kong in a low voice. He was the first to come back to his senses and his face immediately darkened when he realized it was not the overlord. He could not feel any life force coming from the figure. There was not even a trace of it. The figure was simply a mass of energy. The physical body that the energy was inhabiting was very different than that of ordinary people. A Yun clansman heaved a sigh of relief and said, "It's only a trace of consciousness left by the overlord." It was a good thing, for if it was really the overlord, then 80% of them would have committed suicide there and then, but since it was only a trace of the overlord's consciousness, then they had nothing to fear since it was not powerful enough to hurt them. It was then, the Phantom said, the overlord left this divine consciousness to guard against changes in the outside world. Never would I have dreamt that it'd be the Yun clan who opened up the ancestral land. Although it was not a real living breathing person, there was still sadness and anger in its tone. We've guarded this place for the overlord for countless years, and we've already paid off the kindness owed to him. What secrets are there in this ancestral land? Is there a power here that would help me reach the pinnacle? Asked Yun Kong. Yes, the power you're seeking does exist in this land, but that power isn't something you can wield, said the Phantom calmly. Well, we'll see about that. Yun Kong's lust for power became even stronger after hearing what the Phantom said. Without skipping a beat, he launched a palm strike at the Phantom. His power rushed out and roared from all directions to suppress the Phantom. However, the Phantom remained standing where it was and simply let the palm strike hit it as if the attack was just a refreshing, gentle breeze. After the palm strike subsided, he still stood there unscathed. How can this be? Yun Kong widened his eyes in disbelief and felt his scalp tingle as if it was about to explode. He had put quite a lot of power behind that palm strike, and yet, the Phantom completely ignored it. It signified that Yun Kong was even more inferior to an ant in front of it. Not only Yun Kong, but everyone from the Yun clan and Heavenly Palace were equally shocked. The disparity in power was so huge that they could not even fathom it. The Phantom had been in the ancestral land for endless years and it was only a wisp of consciousness of the supreme power. If it could ignore an attack from a wisdom dictator like that, they shuddered to think just how powerful its original form could be. At that moment, everyone's realization of just how powerful the supreme powers from the Origins realm were had reached a new height. This is too terrifying. We don't stand a chance against the power of the Overlord at all. Overlord, please, forgive us. We now know we shouldn't have come here. And we shouldn't have challenged your authority. Your existence in this world is unquestionable. Let's get out of here. The people of the Yun clan were scared out of their wits. They were trembling all over and turned to run without a moment's hesitation. By breaking into the ancestral land, you've disobeyed the ancestral teachings. Thus, everything that the Master gave you should be taken back, said the Phantom evenly. Then, he gently made a single stroke in the air with his hand. In an instant, it was as if the laws of the universe fell and the order was issued. Waves of invisible but irresistible forces swept across the people of the Yun clan. Ah! No. My mana's all gone. Bloodline, the power of my bloodline has disappeared. No, I've forgotten all my skills. And my ultimate spells. How and why? No, my memory is fading, too. Ah! Yun Kong roared miserably, his face twisted from the pain. The pair of fiery red wings gradually disappeared from his forehead, and the fallen god bow and fallen god arrow in his hand fell to the ground. Yun Kong found it hard to accept that he and his men were crippled by a mere vestigial consciousness. How's this possible? How can you do this to us? The others were paralyzed on the ground. One of them pointed at the people of the Heavenly Palace and said, "Why are you only targeting us? What about them? They, too, enter the ancestral land." "Because on them is an aura I can't afford to offend," said the Phantom evenly. "What?" cried out the people of the Yun clan in unison. This shocked them even more when they mistook the Phantom for the Overlord. They were well aware that there was something extraordinary about the people of the Heavenly Palace, but they never thought that they were powerful enough to arouse fear in the Phantom. There was not even a wisdom dictator among them. Moreover, the Phantom was the Overlord's vestigial consciousness, so when it said that it could not afford to offend the Heavenly Palace, it could only mean the statement applied to the Overlord as well. Again, they could not help but wonder just exactly who those people were. Isn't the Overlord one of the supreme powers? Is there anything more powerful than that? Yun Kong and the others could not imagine it. Some of them did not quite believe it. On the other hand, Nanan and the others were extremely calm. The Phantom was right. No one could afford to cross the expert. Besides, there are two familiar auras on them. The Phantom smiled at Nanan and the others and raised his hand. Then, glowing willow branches and the steely stone floated out. They were like old friends greeting each other after a long period of non-contact. Yun Kong's face paled and he quickly said, "Overlord, I was wrong. Please, let me return to the Yun clan. I promise to turn over a new leaf and follow the ancestral teachings forever. Yes, Overlord, please, give us back our powers. We've learned our lesson, begged the others also. No, said the Phantom ruthlessly. The Yun clan was plunged to the depths of despair when suddenly, a raspy and haughty voice came from somewhere. If it's power you want, I can give it to you, too. They all turned their heads to where the voice was coming from and were shocked to see that the new Phantom looked exactly like the Overlord's Phantom. As soon as he heard the voice, Yun Kong began to tremble all over and his face became red. I know this voice. It's you. You're the one who told me that the ancestral land contained amazing fortunes and endless power, he said angrily. This was the voice that had bewitched him all year round, so much so that the idea of entering the ancestral land was planted in his mind. The newly arrived Phantom smiled and said, yes, it's me, and I didn't lie to you. As long as you're willing to submit to me, I can give you supreme power now. The real Overlord's Phantom frowned and sighed. So, it's you. I thought that by staying in the ancestral land, you'd be completely sealed, but it seems like you still managed to worm your way out. Chapter 829 The Unknown. Again. What's going on? Everyone looked at the two Phantoms, confused. Standing face to face, the two Overlord Phantoms seemed to know each other. However, everyone discovered that there was one difference in their appearance. The newly arrived Phantom was wrapped in blood-red chains. The iron chains were glowing red, and they encircled his limbs and his torso tightly. Nanan wrinkled her nose and said suddenly, I sense a familiar and disgusting aura from him. Dragon nodded and said, I sense it, too. It seems to be heaven? Heaven? The Heavenly Palace people were shocked. They were, of course, familiar with the name. After all, it represented the root cause of the chaos in the 7 dimensions. Heaven would have taken over the entire universe if there was no Li Nianfan. Even thinking about what Heaven did before still brought about a terrifying fear in their hearts. They were sure that Heaven was above the level of a wisdom dictator. They did not expect that Heaven would appear in the Origins realm, but then again, why would he not? After all, the supreme powers from before created the ancient forbidden area to seal Heaven away, so it was not surprising that an incarnation of him would be in the Origins realm. Yang Jing arched his brow and said in surprise, is it possible that they failed to completely seal Heaven in the ancient forbidden area? It's likely. However, Heaven's just a name it calls himself. We call him the Unknown, said the real Overlord's Phantom. And you can call me Gravekeeper. I've been tasked with burying all evil thoughts that have been tainted with the Unknown. The Unknown? Tainted evil thoughts? Does that mean that even the supreme powers could be tainted by the Unknown? They were reeling with too much new information. Each word that came from the Gravekeeper's lips was too shocking for them. They all turned to look at the evil thought in unison and a chill ran up their spine. They were well aware of just how terrifying a strong cultivator would be if he was tainted by the unknown grey mist. What was more, the evil thought before them used to be one of the supreme powers, so it would be even more terrifying than any other strong cultivator. The evil thought smiled coldly and said in a low voice, Bullshit. I'm not the Unknown, but a brand new power. I'll create a new world which will be my gift to all beings. Then, he turned to the Gravekeeper and said, now that the ancestral land has opened, my aura has reappeared in the world. Everything from the past will inevitably wake up. No one can stop me now. It's better for you and me to merge. That'll speed up the process of creating a new world. The Gravekeeper looked at the evil thought calmly and said, you've tried to bewitch me for endless years and I've never paid you any mind. I don't care about anything that happens in the outside world. All I care about is stopping you from stepping out of the ancestral land. Ha ha ha, are you sure you can do it now that things have come to this? Asked the evil thought. Then, he looked at Yun Kong and others and asked with a smile, have you made up your mind? Are you willing to accept my power? Yun Kong and the others had a rough picture of what was happening. The ancestral land was created to seal away the evil thought that had been tainted by the unknown. They could not see any other way out of the situation. Now things have come to this, and they were here in pursuit of power, so. We're willing, they said firmly. Ha ha ha, good. The evil thought cackled incessantly and his eyes suddenly turned gray. In the next instant, a cloud of unknown gray mist shrouded Yun Kong and the others like thousands of tentacles flowing into their bodies continuously. The aura on their bodies became stronger and stronger with the infusion of the unknown gray mist. In the blink of an eye, they had regained their lost power and at the same time, pairs of wings reappeared on their foreheads. This time, however, the wings were gray. Yun Kong and the others were ecstatic. Their eyes looked strange and ferocious, and there was a slightly hysterical edge in their voices. My power's back. Ha ha ha, I've never felt so strong before. I pledge my undying loyalty to the new overlord. Greetings, overlord. The gravekeeper's eyes darkened when he saw what happened. He sighed and said, the overlord killed himself, turned this ancestral land into a seal, and left the power of the bloodline to the Yun clan. Through the blood sacrifice day, the seal can be maintained forever. Never would I dream that the Yun clan would be the one to open up the ancestral land. That had to be the irony of the century. Go to the depths of the ancestral land and release me from the seal, ordered the evil thought. The seal could only be broken by external forces. That was where Yun Kong and his men came in handy. Men. Yes, overlord. Immediately, Yun Kong and his men followed the chains into the depths of the ancestral land. Stop. The gravekeeper's expression changed drastically. With a grunt, he launched a palm strike toward Yun Kong and his men. The palm strike contained enough power to seal the sky and imprison everything between it and the earth. It froze everything within it, and it could even annihilate everything in it. Even though Yun Kong and his men had greatly increased their spiritual cultivation, they were still inferior ants under the attack. However, the evil thought obviously would not let his chance of escaping from the seal die, so he, too, launched a palm strike. His palm strike was exactly the same as the gravekeeper's. They were polar opposites of good and evil, but they came from the same source, so their skill and ultimate spells were naturally of the same level. They cast one spell after another, neither gaining the upper hand. Let's go. We need to stop them. We mustn't let them release the evil thought, said Nanan. Everyone agreed and prepared to cross the battlefield. However, just as they took the first step, a strong aura of death enveloped everyone, making their hair stand while a chill ran down their spines. Death point, shouted the evil thought while pointing languidly in the direction of Nanan and the others. This point felt like the arrival of the Grim Reaper, cutting off the world of life and death. There was no resisting death at all. It was difficult to resist the force that separated life and death, even with the two willow branches glowing brilliantly against it. The shadow of death instantly shrouded everyone. Deathly point, shouted the gravekeeper, just in time to neutralize the evil thought's ultimate spell with one of his own. Nanan and the others sighed in relief. However, their heartbeats did not slow down and they dared not move. The fact that the evil thought could attack them meant that it had the upper hand in the battle with the gravekeeper. In other words, there was a high probability that the gravekeeper would lose this round. Sure enough, after a while, both the evil thought and the gravekeeper went still after a terrifying explosion of power. The evil thought was surrounded by thick gray mist, giving him an eerie look. It seemed to become stronger as the battle went on. On the other hand, the gravekeeper looked even fainter than before. Gone was his solid composure that made him seem so lifelike earlier. His voice was trembling and it was obvious that he had lost a lot of his energy. In the past, this seal was maintained by the power of the Yun clan's bloodline. This time, there was no blood sacrifice day, so there's not much of the phantom's power left, said Yang Jing worriedly with a pale face. Chapter 830 The Word That Sealed the Unknown. Gradually, the gravekeeper began to display signs of decline. At his level, once he began to weaken, his inevitable defeat would not be far away. Nanan and the others could not help but feel a little anxious. If even the gravekeeper could not stop the evil thought, what hope did they have left? Sister Willow, can you help the gravekeeper? Pleaded Dragon. The willow branches swayed in the wind as if shaking their heads. If the gravekeeper had not rescued them just now, the evil thought's ultimate spell would have decimated everyone, including the willow branches. Ha ha ha, you and I have been fighting for countless years, and I finally won. I told you a long time ago that it's only a matter of time before the arrival of a new era, and that I'd eventually reappear in the world. Gloated the evil thought. Then, he threw his head back in laughter while his aura became more and more powerful. The gravekeeper's face was expressionless. He did not say anything and continued to parry with the evil thought with determination in his eyes. After all, actions were louder than words. The evil thought was right. The unknown could not be erased. Hence, it could spend countless long years in the ancestral land looking for opportunities. The gravekeeper, however, was different. He had to make sure there was no mistake in the seal's setup, because if there was, the evil thought would be able to find an opening to escape. However, no one could prevent mistakes, for even the Yun clan had a change of heart over the evolution of countless years. However, the gravekeeper was not ready to throw in a towel yet. Wisdom True Dragon, manifest my body. The Gravekeeper's power suddenly condensed rapidly and the endless wisdom around him converged into a giant dragon phantom. The terrifying power instantly turned the entire ancestral land into a vacuum and everything inside it was shaken out. Even Nanan and the others were shaken by the shocking force. This is amazing. Just a trace of the Supreme Power's consciousness can cast such a terrifying ultimate spell. The question is whether it's enough to suppress the unknown. At that moment, the imposing force of the Gravekeeper had also undergone earth-shaking changes. He was no longer degenerating. Instead, he was standing upright and strong, perched on the Wisdom True Dragon's head. He had an aura that was majestic and unstoppable. Overlord. Yun Kong and his men were scared out of their wits by the force and they were trembling non-stop. The lurking in the depths of their bloodlines burst and enveloped them. The ultimate spell was the Gravekeeper's strongest attack. It was also the trump card given to him by the Supreme Power. Yun Kong's face darkened and his mana exploded to the limit. There's no turning back now. We must release the new Overlord to welcome a new future. With all his power, he cast a claw strike toward the depths of the ancestral land. Ah, so you have a trump card hidden after all. The evil thought's face became solemn while the gray mist all over his body bubbled like boiling water. It looked like a roaring beast. World-suppressing heavenly law. A powerful force condensed in his body as well. Then, he launched a palm strike at the Gravekeeper. He was proud of himself and wanted to suppress the Wisdom True Dragon with the power of heaven. Two extremely terrifying forces collided together and turned into endless light that enveloped the sky, stinging everyone's eyes. However, the extraordinariness of this ancestral land was beyond everyone's expectations. Under such terrifying bombardment, it remained intact. It seemed that there was an unimaginable sealing power that could seal everything inside it. Nanan and the others looked at the battlefield once more when the light had all dissipated. There was only a faint outline left of the Gravekeeper after he used almost all of his power for the ultimate spell. It looked like he would be easily blown away by a gust of wind. The evil thought's situation was not much better. He was lying on the ground with only a few wisps of grey mist remaining. Yang Jing gulped and exclaimed, "What a terrifying ultimate spell the Wisdom True Dragon is." It was also unbelievable how the Gravekeeper could reverse his decline with just an ultimate spell. "The ultimate spell alone could make anyone become a supreme power," said Nanan. "Oh, no. We still have to stop the Yun clan," cried Cultivator Junjun in a panic. "Ha ha ha, it's too late," said Yun Kong as his face broke out in a cruel smile. He had successfully torn down the seal with his claw strike. The seal had been held intact by an incredibly tattered piece of paper that had been worn down over the years, so much so that the word on it was no longer legible. Nobody expected that the unknown was sealed by a seemingly ordinarily looking paper. Nanan and the others were shocked while the Gravekeeper looked at the torn paper sadly. As for the evil thought on the ground, he was regaining its power fast. "Why ha ha ha, that damn seal's finally gone." He was beyond ecstatic, to the point of madness. As he raised his hand, the chain that was originally bound to him broke inch by inch without the slightest resistance. At the same time, his power grew even stronger than when he fought against the Gravekeeper earlier. Yun Kong and the others were overjoyed when they saw this, and they hurriedly prostrated before the evil thought. "Congratulations on your glorious return, Overlord. You've done well. You'll all be my people in the future," said the evil thought regally. "Thank you, Overlord." Then, the evil thought's eyes fell on Nanan and others. "You all carry the aura of the supreme powers. Are you their descendants? I'm also willing to accept you as my subjects, and I'll give you stronger powers as well." While speaking, the grey mist surrounded Nanan and the others, as if it would melt into their bodies the moment they nodded their heads. Nanan looked at the grey mist with a look of disgust and quickly shook her head. "No, thanks." The others were also continuously exerting their mana, and looking at the unknown grey mist with extreme vigilance. Unsurprisingly, the evil thought would not take no for an answer. "There's no need to make a decision now. Why don't you give it a try? I guarantee you'll like it." As soon as the evil thought finished speaking, the grey mist immediately surged toward Nanan and the others. All their mana and defense spells were no use against the grey mist at all. They could only watch with horror as the grey mist came at them. Soon, the unknown grey mist was dancing on their skin, but that was about as far as it got, for it found itself unable to penetrate their skin any further. It was as if it was being held back by a mysterious power. This is... The Gravekeeper trembled suddenly and its eyes widened with surprise and delight. Their auras can resist unknown contamination. "How can this be?" the evil thought hissed and screamed. His eyes widened in horror as if recalling something extremely terrifying. Nanan and the others looked confused. They were still trying to figure out what happened when suddenly, the tattered piece of paper seemed to feel something and started moving on its own. It floated in the void, glowing brightly. Then, the mud on the paper faded little by little, revealing the word that was written on it. There was only one word in the center of the paper. Fan. Chapter 831 The word that traversed through the ages. No, why has the seal come back to life? The evil thought's eyes widened in disbelief, and even the overflowing gray mist was trembling. The real root of the ancestral land was this paper seal. Even the gravekeeper was only a backhand used to fight against the evil thought. Over the countless years, the paper seal was gradually worn away, allowing the Yun clan to tear it off from the outside. However, at that moment, the paper once again glowed with brilliance, and a trace of aura circulated them, causing the evil thought's scalp to crawl. This is the aura of the overlord. I finally lived to see this day. The gravekeeper stared at the paper in awe. Although only a phantom, he still was crying and trembling with excitement. Ha ha ha, everything is finally coming back. The unknown will definitely be suppressed. He was crying and laughing at the same time. Then, he bowed deeply to the word fan. Dragon looked at the word fan, and said in surprise, "Fan? Isn't this Brother Lee's?" It was not just her. Everyone from the Heavenly Palace also immediately thought of the expert when they saw this word, because from the time they knew the expert, the word fan had permeated through everything in their world. More importantly, the expert's name had the word fan in it. Nanan took a closer look at the word, and suddenly, she said, "The handwriting. It looks like Brother Lee's handwriting. Could it really be his? The expert must have something to do with the seal. Ha ha ha, we're saved." Only the expert possesses the power to seal up the unknown with one word. The expert has saved the day again. The reason the seal came back to life is that it sensed the experts are on us. That's right. The unknown will never be able to contaminate us as long as we have the experts are on us. The Heavenly Palace people were very excited, and they were no longer afraid of the unknown gray mist swirling around them. Brother Lee's so amazing. The unknown must have been suppressed by him. Dragon's eyes were sparkling and a smile appeared on the corners of her lips when she recalled Li Nianfan telling her that he and the people in the four-part architecture would always be there for them. He must have predicted that this would happen and had already placed some countermeasures. The sealed paper was quietly floating in the air, and the word fan was radiating light. Although it was not bright, they felt as if it was illuminating everything in the world. It was gentle and calm, as opposed to the strangeness and unease of the unknown gray mist. Clear rays of light shot out of the paper, and those that landed on the unknown gray mist made it dissipate, little by little, like the spring sun melting away the last of the snow. No. This is impossible. There's no way you can come back. The evil thought stared at the sealed paper with extreme madness in his eyes. At that moment, every inch of his body was cracked open and his skin began to fall off. There was a thick unknown gray mist circulating the hideous wound, and he looked extremely savage, like a wild beast. Suddenly, he laughed and said hysterically, "So what if you've returned? What can you do to me? The ending will be the same as before." With a roar, the evil thought exploded. The endless unknown gray mist burst forth like a tide, rose into the sky, and converged into a giant beast in the void. He had already escaped the seal and assumed his strongest form, which was several times more terrifying than what the gravekeeper fought. In comparison, the paper was still calm and gentle. Even its brilliance had not changed, as if the unknown gray mist was just a clown putting on a show. "I'll rip you apart, you lousy piece of paper!" thundered the unknown gray mist, and it rushed to envelop the sealed paper from all directions. Brother Lee. The hearts of Dragon and the others instantly clenched. Although they had confidence in the Li Nianfan, the unknown gray mist was too terrifying. This was not just the power of the unknown gray mist, but also part of the power of the supreme power. The sealed paper, however, had been worn down through countless years, and it was only able to recover by relying on Li Nianfan's aura. Hence, they could not help but wonder if it was really powerful enough to fight against the unknown gray mist. Under the nervous gazes of everyone, the unknown gray mist lunged towards the sealed paper, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, the word fan glowed with endless rays of light, like the sun illuminating the entire ancestral land. Ah! Miserable screams came from the unknown gray mist, and it began to tremble non-stop. Accompanied by a harsh sound, the unknown gray mist was dissipating at a speed visible to the naked eye. The word fan, traversing the ages, once recovered, illuminated the endless unknown. No. The unknown gray mist let out a final unwilling roar before it was then purified. The entire ancestral land returned to its calm state in an instant, and the unknown gray mist was nowhere to be seen. The sealed paper seemed to have exhausted the last trace of its power. It floated in the air before bursting into flames. Then, it dissipated with the wind. The place has been purified. Take that, you unknown. This will teach you to never mess with the expert. The expert's indeed invincible. Liverless. Nanan and others broke out in relieved smiles while Yun Kong and the others were dumbfounded. Their eyes were glazed and their emotions were like a roller coaster going up and down. First, everything was abolished by the Gravekeeper, and at the moment of despair, their powers were returned to them by the new overlord. Just when they thought they were able to welcome a bright future, the paper seal came along and dashed all that hope. They felt like they were being played. As the unknown gray mist dissipated, so did the power in their bodies. They became crippled and paralyzed on the ground again. Spare me, Overlord. I was bewitched by the unknown. I didn't know what I was doing. Overlord, we were wrong. Please, forgive us. Yun Kong and the others knelt on the ground, begging for mercy. The Gravekeeper looked at them calmly and said lightly, I was planning on sparing your lives, but you keep making the same mistakes again and again, so I'm left with no choice but to execute you on behalf of the Master. He gently raised his hand and launched a palm strike, immediately wiping out Yun Kong and the others on the spot. Yun Kong and the others had turned their backs on the Yun clan and opened the ancestral land. Not to mention, they pledged their allegiance to the unknown gray mist and tore off the seal. A quick death was the greatest mercy granted to them for all the sins they had committed. Having dealt with Yun Kong and the others, the Gravekeeper turned to look at Nanan and the others, eyes filled with complexity. Where are you from? We're from the ancient Forbidden Area, answered Nanan. The ancient Forbidden Area? The Gravekeeper was slightly taken aback. The Supreme Power's memories were not shared with him, so he had no idea what was going on in the outside world. The ancient Forbidden Area is also the place where the Supreme Power sealed away the unknown gray mist, explained Yang Jing quickly. The Gravekeeper nodded dazedly. He looked at the willow branches and the stone and said, I see, it's no wonder I feel the aura of an old friend from you. Senior, what happened back then? Asked Dragon curiously. The Gravekeeper pondered for a moment. Then, he said, I was tasked by the Master to keep guard, so he didn't leave me with too many memories. I only know that at that time, it was rumored that heaven was sick. Chapter 832 The whole world will turn upside down. Heaven was sick? The Heavenly Palace people were all surprised. The word sick was not something immortals heard often. After all, the basic tenet of an immortal was that it was impossible for them to get sick, so it was even more impossible for heaven to be sick. Do you mean that heaven went through some unknowable drastic changes? Asked Cultivator Junjun thoughtfully. Yes. The Gravekeeper nodded. Back then, the laws of heaven suddenly reversed, causing problems in all cultivators' spiritual cultivation. Wisdom became chaotic, the laws were in retrograde, and the seasons were uncertain. It caused everyone to fall into chaos. Everyone wore looks of surprise. It did sound like heaven was sick. What happened after that? Asked Nanan. The chaos only lasted for thousands of years and it didn't cause much damage at first. The Gravekeeper took a deep breath and continued, but then, many cultivators who had problems with their spiritual cultivation suddenly discovered a new cultivation method, and a new power appeared between heaven and earth. This method of cultivation was faster and stronger, and it instantly attracted countless cultivators. However, most of them were cautious and vigilant against this inexplicable force. Because it has something to do with the unknown? Guessed Yang Jing. The Gravekeeper nodded. After 100 years, everyone has discovered the problem. Those cultivators who practiced the new methods of cultivation became irritable and indifferent. They were ruthless, unscrupulous, and unrestrained in their anger. They would resort to anything, even endless slaughter, in the pursuit of power. Dragon frowned. They sound possessed, just like someone who has been infected by the unknown. Didn't anyone try to do anything about it? Of course, measures were taken. The top forces in the Origins realms immediately joined forces with countless cultivators to suppress this method of cultivation. The Gravekeeper shook his head. However, it was too late. At that time, some of the elders of several peak powers had come to a crossroads. In addition, the inexplicable force was already incomparably rich. It even manifested itself in the form of a grey mist that almost blanketed the entire Origins realm. Grey mist? Everyone from the Heavenly Palace gasped. So that was where the gray mist came from. That's right. The gray mist is the unknown. The supreme powers from the Origins realm banded together and tried every means to suppress the unknown, which led to the current situation, said the Gravekeeper. How did this gray mist come about? Asked Cultivator Junjun. There were many conjectures about the gray mist back then, but only two were recognized by the Master. The first possibility is that the unknown was some extremely terrifying taboo that was broken by someone, and it created the evilest cultivation method. The second possibility is that the rules of heaven descended into chaos, thus, giving birth to this power that can bring about the end of the world, answered the Gravekeeper. I'm guessing you're more inclined to the second possibility since you said heaven was sick? Asked Yang Jing. How glorious was the Master back then? As one of the original supreme powers, he was confident that his power was at its peak, and that no one could create a power stronger than him, said the Gravekeeper with a proud smile. Then, who was the one who wrote the word fan? Asked Nanan, who was more interested in getting the answer to this question. He's. The Gravekeeper paused. Then, his expression turned confused. He shook his head and said, I don't know. I only know that the person who left it is very, very important. The Master and the other supreme powers have been waiting for his return. Waiting for his return? But all the supreme powers are all gone. No, they've always been here, said the Gravekeeper in a firm tone. They left behind their powers, waiting for him to return and fight again. Are you referring to the Origins Pond of Holy Dimensions? Dragon and Nanan were stunned at the same time as they recalled all that had happened to them in the Origins Pond of Holy Dimension. They thought of those treasures, spiritual items, and skills that had willingly followed them, and how everything would turn out in their favor. They must have sensed Li Nai and Fanzora on them. At the same time, they thought of their disdainful attitude towards those treasures and they could not help but feel a little guilty. The Heavenly Palace people were awestruck. Although their physical bodies were no more, their powers still existed so that they would be able to rise up again for battle. Those Origins Pond of Holy Dimension were clearly monuments to those heroes. The Gravekeeper looked at Nanan and the others with envious brilliance in his eyes and said, since you have his aura, you must be in contact with him. You're destined to have a bright future and reach the pinnacle of wisdom. It's up to you all to end the era of the unknown. The Gravekeeper's phantom was getting fainter and fainter and was about to completely dissipate. With a wave of his hand, the Fallen God bow and Fallen God arrow appeared before Nanan and Dragon. This bow and arrow contain the source of the Master's power. They're willing to fight side by side with you. Dragon stretched out a small hand and grasped them cautiously. We'll treasure this bow and arrow as if they're our own lives. The ancestral land has been opened and the unknown has reappeared. All heaven and earth will inevitably be overturned. There isn't much time left. With a last warning from the Gravekeeper, his phantom gradually faded and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, somewhere else in the Origins realm, where a large sect was located, there was a huge mausoleum at the back mountain of the sect. 2 disciples were guarding the entrance. Our Tianyun sect was also a top power back then, but it has fallen so much. Even the small Beimo family dares to challenge us. Yeah, our Tianyun sect has existed for countless years, and the Beimo family has only just emerged 8,000 years ago. No wonder the powerful like to cling to their position. Suddenly, there was a roar coming from the cemetery behind them. A peculiar aura raged out from it, suffocating them. This is... The 2 disciples looked into the depths of the mausoleum, terrified. It seems to be coming from the founder's mausoleum? They thought it was impossible since the founder of the Tianyun sect had been dead for endless years. Before they could react, their pupils shrank again and their minds went blank when they saw an old man walking out of the mausoleum slowly. His face was haggard and his body was like a dried corpse. Also, he was surrounded by wisps of gray mist. A voice that was hoarse enough to give people goosebumps came out of his mouth. Who will wake up from the dream? I've returned once again. Fu. Founder? Trembling, the 2 disciples instantly prostrated on the ground. They were both shocked and delighted. Shocked because their founder had come back from the dead, and delighted because their illustrious founder would be able to bring the Tianyun sect to its former glory. After all, it was because of the sudden and inexplicable death of their founder that the status of the Tianyun sect plummeted. For countless years, every year grew worse than the previous year. They had been reduced to their current sorry state. Welcome back, founder, they said respectfully. Ha ha ha. As the first disciples to greet me, I'll give the 2 of you good fortune. The 2 disciples were overjoyed and quickly said, thank you, founder. There was a strange glint in the founder's eyes, and the gray mist swirling around his body immediately lunged at the two disciples like tentacles. Ah! Ah! The two of you will have the good fortune of being my nourishment. Ha ha ha. Chapter 833 The Power of the Unknown has reappeared. In the Origins realm, there was a barren land in the northern star region. The earth there was red and covered densely with cracks, revealing the red magma flowing underneath it. The magma was like the meridians of the planet, covering thousands of miles. In the central area, there was a cluster of volcanoes of many different sizes and they were all gurgling with heat waves. The terrifyingly high temperature dyed the top of the volcanoes a fiery red. Occasionally, flames would spew out from it. It was a place that not even a third-step wisdom elite would dare to step foot in. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently and all the volcanoes erupted at the same time. However, what they spewed out was not magma but a thick gray mist. The gray mist rose into the sky and instantly blotted out the sun. The whole world had become a world of gray mist. Suddenly, a roar was heard coming from the inside of the largest volcano. The sound shook the gray mist and within it, a fierce beast could be seen spreading its wings. It was so large that it almost covered the entire sky. At another place in the Origins realm, there was an endless ocean. The originally calm seawater suddenly tossed and turned, setting off huge waves that were hundreds of feet high. The endless sea engulfed everything on the seashore. The huge waves were like angry beasts, slamming their paws down on the earth. The force itself was so strong that it would be an understatement to call it a tsunami. What happened? What's going on? How is the power of the tsunami so terrifying? It contains the power of wisdom. It's an attack. Everyone, get ready. Open the sect's great formation and use your powers to resist the tsunami together. The people from the sect closest to the sea were shocked, but they quickly responded. Their shield formation lit up and many disciples took to the air at the same, casting a myriad of spells to resist and stop the tsunami. However, they soon discovered a problem. If it was an ordinary tsunami, they only needed to wave their hands to suppress it. However, this time, their spells could not control the seawater at all. Moreover, the power of the waves was growing more and more terrifying. From being as powerful as a Chaos Daluo Gold Immortal, it grew and grew until its power was comparable to that of a second-step Wisdom Elite, and still, the power kept growing. Everything around it had been swallowed up by the sea, leaving only the shield of the sect still standing. However, it was like a canoe that would overturn at any time. What could have possibly happened? This kind of power is more powerful than even a wisdom dictator. They all became terrified when they looked at the monstrous waves. The waves were not only aimed at their sect but the entire shore. The sea was boundless. With such a large scale and such a shocking power, the destruction that it would bring was simply unimaginable. At their levels, they had long forgotten what it was like to be afraid of ordinary natural disasters. At that moment, they once again felt the horror. Could this be the power of heaven? Some of them wondered in shock. What is that? Shouted a disciple suddenly. Under the huge waves, a huge shadow suddenly emerged. It was swimming rapidly in the sea and its body was like a dark cloud covering the sky and the sun. At the same time, wisps of gray mist began to drift out from the sea's surface, dyeing the air above the entire sea gray. Splash! The huge shadow suddenly jumped out of the sea, swallowing the entire sect with its huge mouth. Upheavals were happening everywhere in the Origins realm. The slumbering gray mist in various places seemed to have awakened, some from the ground, some from the water, some from the bodies of living creatures, gushing out and spreading rapidly until everywhere was covered with the gray mist. At the same time, at the headquarters of the Heaven Plundering Alliance, a tall figure wearing a mask stood in the hall, facing a strange floor-to-ceiling cabinet. The mask the figure was wearing was of a smiling baby's face with red cheeks. It looked quite weird on him as he looked at the transparent floor-to-ceiling cabinet in front of him. In the center of the cabinet were balls of gray mist, rolling here and there. In addition, there were all kinds of magical ultimate treasures placed side by side in the cabinet. There was a blade, a sword, a painting, and there was also a bow that looked exactly like the fallen god bow. The ultimate treasures were not the physical forms but energy forms that had perfectly inherited all the power of their physical forms. The balls of gray mist were the unknown gray mist that called itself Heaven. It turned out that the Heaven Plundering Alliance had been collecting the powers of the various battle spirits and even the unknown gray mist. The masked man looked at the restless unknown gray mist with a strange glint in his eyes. Someone finally took the bait. This world will be upended again now that the unknown gray mist has reappeared. My chance has finally come. Ha ha ha, There's nothing in this world that I cannot get my hands on. Even if it's God himself. Meanwhile, Nanan and the others had exited the Yun clan's ancestral land with the fallen god bow and fallen god arrow. Once outside, they were stunned by what they saw. The whole world had completely changed. The sky was gray and there was gray mist as far as they could see. In the distance, there seemed to be more of the terrifying gray mist spewing out, forming an air wave that was changing the area. Cultivator Junjun's eyes widened in shock. What's going on? Are all these, the unknown gray mist? How can there be so much of it? It has spread to almost every corner, said Yang Jing in a thick voice. So, this is what the Gravekeeper meant when he said the world will turn upside down. The opening of the ancestral land seems to have awakened the unknown gray mist. Uncle Gravekeeper said we don't have much time left, but I never expected it to happen so fast. Why did the world change immediately after we came out? They were repulsed by what they were seeing. The sceneries were the same as before. It was just that the addition of the gray mist depressed them. It floated in the void and contained bursts of strange energy. Our benefactors have come out. The Yun chief ran over excitedly and bowed to everyone. My name's Yun Chen. Thank you for saving us. Cultivator Junjun stepped forward to help Yun Chen up and said with a smile, Chief Yun Chen, there's no need for this. We're just doing our job. Chief Yun Chen, what happened here? Asked Yang Jing quizzically. Back then, the unknown gray mist took over the entire Origins realm, contaminating countless people and demons. They even began to cultivate with the power of the unknown. Although the supreme powers finally suppressed the unknown and the cultivators who were contaminated with it fell into a deep sleep, the reappearance of the gray mist has awakened them from their slumber. The power of the unknown once again shrouds the entire Origins realm. The Yun chief stone was full of self-blame and he said sadly, the Yun clan has failed to do what the overlord entrusted us to do. We've brought about the downfall of the Origins realm. Chapter 834 The Guardians. Chief Yun Chen, what happened was not your fault. Yun Kong and his men were manipulated by the unknown to open up the ancestral land, said Cultivator Junjun as he consoled the chief. They were well aware of the unknown gray mist's bewitching ability and that it was easy for anyone to fall under its manipulation. Even the Eldritchs, who were undeniably a powerful clan, were not spared from the unknown gray mist's manipulation. The Yun chief's brows remained furrowed. Suddenly, the fiery red wings between his eyebrows started to glow, and at the same time, the fallen god bow and fallen god arrow also lit up. Immediately, all the fiery wings of the Yun clansmen's foreheads started glowing as well. The Yun chief trembled violently before he knelt and bowed to Nanan and the others again. He said sincerely, the Yun clan is willing to serve our benefactors. The other Yun clan members also knelt and said in unison, the Yun clan is willing to serve our benefactors. Nanan and others were all stunned. What are you doing? Asked Dragon. Our bloodline is connected to the fallen god bow. Just now, the fallen god bow told us that you're the key to defeating the unknown. Allow us to do our best to assist you, said the Yun chief. Nanan arched her brow and asked doubtfully, the bow can do that? Or, could it be that your overlord's still alive? The overlord died in battle, but his will is pinned on this bow. It has been waiting for the key to defeat the unknown to appear. Answered the Yun chief with a tinge of sadness in his voice. The key to defeating the unknown. They were beginning to understand how the seven supreme powers operated. Even if they died in battle, they would find ways to transform their will into battle spirit guardians, so that one day, when the opportunity came, they would be able to finish off the unknown. No, it was not just the seven battle spirit guardians. The same was true of many Origins Pond of holy dimensions in the Origins realm. Countless forebearers had left their inheritance, their power, and their will, just to provide more opportunities for future generations. They must have been waiting for countless years. Don't worry, the unknown will definitely be suppressed, said Nanan firmly. Dragon also nodded and said, that's right. If we can suppress the unknown who caused the catastrophe in the seven dimensions, then we can suppress the unknown in the Origins realm, too. Then, Nanan and the others took the fallen god bow back to the ancient forbidden area, while the Yun clan went out of the mountain to do some investigation. Meanwhile, the entire Origins realm was in shock and panic. Countless people fell into a trance after staring at the unknown gray mist that contained a strange power. What kind of power is this? I've never seen anything like this. The whole world is changing drastically and I feel like something big is about to happen. Upheavals are happening all over the Origins realm. It seems that some kind of terrifying existence is awakening. Ha ha ha, this gray mist is a brand new power. I broke through my bottleneck after absorbing it. It's some good stuff. The power of the gray mist is definitely a great opportunity, a great fortune. Quick, breathe it in. At that moment, the volcanic land had completely become a world of gray mist. The endless gray mist was still spewing out of the volcanoes and spreading beyond the land. An old man in white stood on the edge of the land, staring at the gray mist with deep eyes. His old weather-beaten face was calm. He slowly stretched out his hand and strands of golden light poured out from his fingers and melted into the void. A majestic force burst from his body just when the gray mist was about to swallow him. "Wisdom imprisonment, space lock," shouted the old man majestically. In an instant, strings of golden silk thread appeared out of thin air. These golden silk threads connected with each other to form a golden prison, imprisoning the entire volcanic land and confining the endless gray mist. The entire area, which stretched for thousands of miles, was entrapped by the old man with a single command. His skill was so powerful that even the unknown gray mist was unable to break through. With a roar, a huge phantom slowly flew out of the gray mist. It was a black dragon with 2 wings on its back. A cold light shot out from its gray pupils in its long and narrow eyes, and the terrifying oppressive force charged toward the old man. "Stupid guardian, I've been in slumber for so many years, yet, you're still here," said the dragon coldly. "From the moment you fell asleep, I started a sect here to seal up this area. Now, I have to ask you to go back to where you came from," said the old man calmly. "Ha ha ha, you dare stop me? I'll give you a taste of this brand new power." At the seaside, a middle-aged man carrying a wine gourd larger than a human slowly stepped into the air. He was dressed casually, his eyes were hazy, and he was swaying around as if he was drunk. However, with his arrival, an invisible barrier quietly appeared, and the roaring and tumbling waves instantly evaporated into nothingness when they touched the barrier. It was quite a spectacle. Half of the world's ocean waves were raging to a height of hundreds of feet, while the other half of the world was as dry as a drought. The same was true of the gray mist overflowing from the sea, forming 2 distinct worlds. The middle-aged man pointed at the seawater drunkenly and said, "The gray mist affects the taste of the wine. I, the drunkard guardian, request the unknown to immediately leave this place." The sea surged and parted, leaving a vacuum in the middle. A tall figure who looked like a human that was covered in blue scales with slender ears stepped out slowly. He looked at the drunkard and said coldly, "The new era is coming. I won't stop until the gray mist completely contaminates this world. I'll spare your life if you leave this place now." The drunkard shook his head again and again. "No, no, the gray mist affects the taste of the wine." "Why, you piece of SHT?" The man's eyes widened and the sea suddenly roared. The endless sea had condensed into a beast and it immediately chomped down on the drunkard. In the blink of an eye, the invisible barrier was washed away and the sea covered the sky and engulfed everything. The drunkard smiled drunkenly, took the gourd from behind his back, lifted it high, and poured the wine into his mouth. A fiery flame burst from the ground and enveloped the drunkard's body as soon as the wine hit his throat as if it was fire and not wine that he was drinking. The flames and the returning waves intertwined with each other, and the terrifyingly high temperature instantly evaporated all the water that formed the beast. Meanwhile, Nanan and the others finally arrived at the fallen immortal mountain just as the upheavals were happening all around the Origins realm. Chapter 835. Daji's conjecture. Third brother. The Steely's human phantom immediately manifested when it saw the fallen god Bo, revealing the mixed emotions in his eyes. However, the fallen god Bo was unable to respond because its battle spirit was already destroyed, leaving only the will of the supreme power. The Steely could only look at it with deep sorrow. "Uncle Steely, the unknown has reappeared in the Origins realm. It might have something to do with Brother Lee, so we're going to see him right away," said Dragon. They could not help but link the seal paper to Li Nianfan since the handwriting on it was incredibly similar to his, not to mention the word fan was the exact term used in his name. They would not be surprised if he was really the one who wrote it. The unknown? The Steely's eyes instantly filled with hatred and disgust. Then, he turned to the fallen god Bo again and said, "Third brother, the unknown has reappeared and we can join forces again. This time, I'm sure we can completely obliterate it." The fallen god Bo emitted a burst of red light as if responding. Then, Nanan and the others said goodbye to the Steely and walked quickly up the mountain, all the while with frowns on their faces. So, the unknown came from the Origins realm, and the one sealed in the 7 dimensions was just a part of it, said Cultivator Junjun with shock. Yang Jing took a deep breath and said, "Judging by the number of Origins Pond of Holy Dimension, the war to seal the unknown must have been fierce." The Origins Pond of Holy Dimension was a world of its own. It had its own rules and comprised countless treasures and inheritance. Even now, their abilities were beyond the reach of the Heavenly Palace people. So many strong cultivators perished in the war, so it was not hard to imagine just how fearsome the unknown was at its full power. The Gravekeeper said that heaven was sick, and the unknown calls itself heaven. Could heaven's sickness be caused by heaven? Said Xiao Changfeng, making a bold guess. Goddess Nuwa took a deep breath, and in a shaky voice, she said, maybe heaven was contaminated with the unknown, and that's how it got sick. This made them fear the unknown even more. After all, no one would want their own world to be turned upside down. On their way back to the seven dimensions, they noticed that the gray mist was getting thicker and thicker in the Origins realm. Apart from that, a few places were being shaken up by terrifyingly oppressive forces. The oppressive forces were so powerful that even a hint of them was enough to make them quake in their boots. They assumed these forces came from the supreme powers since the areas where the upheavals were happening were in areas that had the thickest unknown gray mist. It was obvious that they were the cultivators who had been cultivating with the unknown gray mist during the era when it was active. No matter what the unknown is, I'm sure Brother Li will be able to wipe it out, said Dragon confidently. At the mention of Li Nianfan, their anxious hearts calmed down a little, but just a little. Cultivator Junjun furrowed his brows and asked Nanan and Dragon, goddesses, are you going to tell the expert about the unknown gray mist? Both Nanan and Dragon shook their heads in unison. I don't know why but Brother Li keeps emphasizing the word fan. I didn't think it was my place to help him unravel it. Besides, I'm sure he'll get it one day, said Dragon. Yes, you're right to think that way. No matter what, we have to keep this secret safe with us, said Cultivator Junjun solemnly. Is there something else on your mind? Asked Goddess Nuwa. Cultivator Junjun sighed and said, I admit that the word fan in the Yun clan's ancestral land was very powerful, but if it was really written by the expert, that means that even he couldn't suppress the unknown back then, meaning to say he was actually defeated. Cultivator Junjun could not make himself utter the last two words. He simply sighed. Do you mean the expert chose to become immortal in preparation to completely obliterate the unknown this time? Asked Yang Jing in a low voice. That's my guess, replied Cultivator Junjun with a nod. If Li Nianfan was really defeated in the past, he could very well have turned himself into a mortal to hide from the unknown, and if he was not defeated back then, he might be doing so to completely obliterate the unknown this time. Whichever it was best if they did not bring him out of his state of the ultimate existence. I don't care what it is, but I, Xiao Changfeng, am willing to serve the expert till the end of the world. I'll ensure the grey mist doesn't disrupt the expert's state of ultimate existence, said Xiao Changfeng with a grin, his tone full of determination. Soon, the familiar four-part architecture came into view. The Heavenly Palace people stopped in their tracks, not daring to disturb Li Nianfan with another visit of theirs, not when the party happened not too long ago. Only Nanan and Dragon went in with the fallen god bow in their hands. Brother Li, we're back, they said as they pushed open the gate. Li Nianfan was not in the courtyard, but everyone else was there. Master's in the backyard, said Daji. The responsibility of taking care of the backyard had naturally fallen on Li Nianfan since Nanan and Dragon had gone out. Fire Phoenix looked at the fallen god bow in their hands and with a smile, she said, is this the battle spirit you girls rescued? Did you have a smooth trip this time? Nanan and Dragon pouted and said worriedly, not really. We may have screwed up this time. What happened? Asked Fire Phoenix quizzically. Nanan and Dragon relayed to them all that had happened. The expressions on Daji and the others became more and more solemn as the story went on. The rebirth of the unknown. Li Nianfan's handwriting. The world being turned upside down. All that and more were proof of just how serious the mishaps were. Sister Daji, the power of the unknown's truly terrifying. We have no idea what's the situation in the Origins realm right now, but we assume it's not optimistic, said Nanan worriedly. It would be really horrifying if the Origins realm is completely covered by the unknown, said Qin Manyun fearfully. Actually, not long ago, I discovered something about the unknown gray mist, and now I'm even more sure about my hypothesis after hearing what you've told us, said Daji after a while. Sister Daji, do you know what the unknown gray mist is? Asked Dragon happily. Daji did not answer her. Instead, she waved her hand and the snow globe with the unknown gray mist trapped inside it flew to her. Look inside and tell me what has changed, said Daji. Nanan and the others looked at the snow globe in her hand and saw the unknown gray mist flowing around like water. Suddenly, Dragon's eyes widened in surprise and she shouted, "There's lesser gray mist." The others were taken aback by surprise as well. The gray mist used to fill up the entire snow globe, but now, there was less than half of the amount. What's going on here? Did some of the gray mist escape? Asked Nanan. No, it didn't escape. Instead, it integrated with the four-part architecture, said Daji. As she spoke, she slowly stretched out her right hand and after activating her mana, a wisp of gray mist appeared in her palm and merged with her mana. Chapter 836 The Expert and the Bow. Sister Daji, did you just absorb the unknown? Asked Dragon in wide-eyed horror. The others were also looking worriedly at her. Even heaven could be contaminated with it, and once contaminated, it would inevitably lead to the most undesirable consequences. That was why the supreme powers had to sacrifice themselves to seal the unknown. Daji shook her head and calmly said, "I'm fine." How? How is this possible? Asked Shitukin incredulously. It wasn't me who absorbed the unknown but the four-part architecture. As a result, some unknown changes have taken place in the spiritual chi and wisdom here. Daji paused for a breath before continuing, I only realized this after becoming a wisdom dictator. After the four-part architecture absorbed the unknown, the power of the wisdom here actually became more complete, as if it was complementary to the unknown gray mist. Thus, the upper limit of cultivation here has become higher than anywhere else. The spiritual chi in the four-part architecture can actually complement the unknown? Everyone was shocked. Are you saying that the four-part architecture is using the power of the unknown as nourishment? Or is the power of the unknown a missing component in the natural world? Asked Chinmanyun. Nanan frowned and asked, Sister Daji, is the wisdom in the four-part architecture incomplete? No, not incomplete, said Daji with a shake of her head. It's more like pushing it to a higher level. In other words, absorbing the unknown gray mist can increase the upper limit of the four-part architecture. Chinmanyun's eyes lit up and then she excitedly said, I get it now. No wonder Master wants to collect the unknown gray mist. It was for that reason. We all know that the four-part architecture didn't used to be like this. With a look of reminiscence in her eyes, Nanan exclaimed, yeah. Brother Li's made the four-part architecture to what it is now little by little. In the beginning, there were only spiritual water and spiritual roots in Li Nianfan's four-part architecture. While all of them were rare treasures for any immortal cultivators, the amount and the grade of treasures were still incomparable to all the treasures that the four-part architecture had now. Later, the four-part architecture went through more transformations, the spiritual chi became more and more abundant, the insights were continuously elevated, and even the prehistoric era was upgraded to the area of the gods. Then, the entire 7 dimensions were combined into one great dimension. Not to mention, even the spiritual roots had become wisdom spiritual roots, and the spiritual water had become wisdom spiritual water. The growth of the four-part architecture was evident, and it was still growing to greater heights by absorbing the unknown gray mist. Blackie, who was lying on the ground and basking in the sun, slowly stood up and said thoughtfully, no wonder the spiritual roots and food I've eaten recently contain more power. This unknown gray mist sure is some good stuff. We should catch more of it and bring it back. But wouldn't we be contaminated by the unknown? Asked Dragon cautiously. I think it should be fine since Master was the one who requested us to make more snow globes for him. Maybe he's planning on using it for growth so that he can one day win against the unknown, said Fire Phoenix. Daji nodded and said, don't worry. My mana's as fine as ever. There's no sign of it being contaminated by the unknown. We should see this as an opportunity for us to grow stronger as well. Hearing this, everyone clenched their fists tightly with determination. The power of the unknown was too terrifying. If the conclusion of the battle countless years ago was really as they had guessed, they had to become stronger to suppress the unknown for Li Nianfan. Nanan waved her small fist in the air and said excitedly, we should start out small. Let's capture the unknown with the ultimate aim of killing it at its source. It was then that Li Nianfan appeared from the backyard. His hands and shoes were covered in dirt from working in the garden. He smiled when he saw how lively everyone was. Ah, I was wondering why it's so lively here. It turns out that Nanan and Dragon are back, said Li Nianfan. Brother Li. Dragon and Nanan ran over and hugged him. Brother Li, you must be tired. Let me wash your hands for you. Brother Li, I'll wash your shoes. They felt a little guilty that the gardening work had fallen to Li Nianfan and were determined to make it up to him. Li Nianfan happily let them pamper him and felt his heart was lifted by their thoughtfulness. It was as if he was a child who had a long day at school and finally arrived home to be coddled by his mom. "Was your rescue mission successful?" asked Li Nianfan. "Yes, but the battle was really fierce," said Dragon with a nod. Li Nianfan nodded and said, "I'm just glad the two of you came back safe and sound. Let me cook something for you later." Nanan and Dragon's eyes lit up and they said happily, "You're the best, Brother Li." "Huh? That bow looks impressive. Were you the ones who brought it back?" said Li Nianfan when he noticed the fallen god bow. The bow was fiery red like burning flames while the edge and the center were inlaid with gold that had the brilliance of the sun. The most striking part of the bow was definitely the fine patterns carved all over it. "Yup," said Nanan with a nod. "Very nice. Look at the quality of it. This bow's definitely better than the one I made." Li Nianfan held the bow admiringly in his hands. He could not help but feel ashamed when he thought back to the ugly bow and arrows he made before. "Nanan, I never knew you were interested in archery," said Li Nianfan with a smile. Then, he suddenly had an urge to try out the bow for himself. "How about I show you how to use it?" "The expert's going to use the bow?" Everyone's hearts skipped a little and their eyes became as big as saucers. "Yay! We get to see the expert in action again. With that bow and the expert's strength, it's not hard to imagine that the sky will be ripped apart." Everyone immediately looked forward to the performance. "Why are you all looking at me like that? Although I'm just a mortal, I can still shoot arrows," said Li Nianfan a little ruefully. "Shoot the arrow, Brother Li," said Nanan excitedly. "All right, you better not blink," said Li Nianfan with a laugh. He then slowly raised the bow. This simple action gave everyone a sense of pleasantness, and at the same time, they wondered if they could ever wield the bow as effortlessly as Li Nianfan did. It was as if the fallen god bow was like an extra appendage of his, and he was only doing what was innate to him. Of course, Li Nianfan would never let an opportunity for a lecture slip by. Everyone who's good at archery must pay attention to their posture because it's the very foundation of archery. The stronger one's foundation is, the easier it'll be to wield the bow. Remember, the body should be upright. Don't shrink your neck, don't show your arms, don't bend your waist, don't lean forward, don't lean back. Don't puff up your chest. Chapter 837 An arrow to save the day. The area shook violently as soon as Li Nianfan drew the bowstring. Although there were no physical changes on him, in the eyes of Daji and the others, he had become the center of the world and it seemed as if he had become as large as a monolith that could hold up the sky. Not only that, a terrifying momentum was overflowing from his body, turning the sky pale. Cultivator Junjun and the others who were outside of the four-part architecture widened their eyes in shock when they sensed the terrifying aura flowing out of the four-part architecture. This power is... It's so strong. The four-part architecture is like an energy vortex, draining all the power in this world. What kind of ultimate spell is this? What is this? The Heavenly Palace people's lips trembled as they stared at the four-part architecture, dumbfounded. They felt as if their skulls were about to explode. Only the expert can summon a power like this. Could it be that he? In the next moment, an indescribably terrifying arrow cut across the sky, followed by a piercing thunderous sound that exploded in the void. Although it was fleeting, it still managed to make everyone's hair stand on ends. They felt that they had seen the most terrifying power in the world, and they even had the urge to get down on their knees in worship. Cultivator Junjun suddenly gasped, his pupils shrank into a line, and there was horror in his voice as he said, "The arrow's going in the direction of the Origins realm." Meanwhile, the unknown gray mist had become denser and denser in the Origins realm, with more places being covered by it. Although the unknown gray mist in some areas was not particularly strong, it still began to change the Origins realm and many cultivators could not resist the temptation of the unknown gray mist and began to cultivate with it. "I want revenge. Please, give me power. I want to kill them all." A cultivator knelt on the ground and looked up at the sky with a grim face. With him as the center, the gray mist in the void began to pour into his body. The mana in his body began to boil and a powerful momentum flowed out. His body began to tremble violently as if unable to bear the force. Gradually, his eyes turned milky gray and white hair began to sprout from every inch of his skin. "Ha ha ha, now this is what I'm talking about. Revenge. Kill," he roared like a wild beast before he disappeared into the distance with one step. "Women, I want women. With great power, I can do whatever I want. I'll be the ultimate rule here. Ha ha ha. I need more power to become the #1 sect. I'll become the #1 genius in history. The bottleneck that has plagued me for 5,000 years has finally been broken. This gray mist is so wonderful. A beautiful era has come. The entire Origins realm had descended into chaos. In the northern star region of the Origins realm, there was a towering mountain shaped like a giant sword with its tip plunged into the ground. Wave after wave of terrifying, domineering, and unrivaled sword chi surrounded the entire mountain, making it so that even a wisdom elite would not dare to run rampant there. There was a sect on the top of the mountain called the Divine Sword Sect. At that moment, two old men were standing on the roof of the main hall. They were dressed in black and white respectively, and they were looking at the gray mist that was blanketing the sky with frowns on their faces. No one from the Divine Sword Sect is allowed to absorb the gray mist, and those who violate the order will be killed, said the old man in white authoritatively. His voice spread all over the mountain, echoing in the ears of every disciple. The disciples of the Divine Sword Sect responded immediately. Yes, Sect Master. The old man in black sighed and said worriedly, the whole world has fallen under the unknown spell. How long do you think it'd be before someone defies your order? Not more than 3 days, said the old man in white in a low voice. He knew in his heart that within 3 days, there would be some disciples who would not be able to resist the temptation of the gray mist, and thus, would cultivate with it. Under normal circumstances, his order would naturally be obeyed, but now that the whole world was overturned, there was no guarantee that the disciples would listen to him. The man in black nodded and said, the power of the gray mist can increase a cultivator's power extremely quickly. Although everyone will eventually find that the gray mist would subtly change one's temperament and magnify their negative emotions, one can't help but to absorb the gray mist as well if their opponent surpasses them after absorbing the gray mist. The gray mist would elevate the power of many people to a higher level. Those cultivators who did not absorb it would fall behind their peers, but if they did absorb it, they would experience a change in temperament. It was a dilemma of catastrophic proportions. Even if the cultivators managed to stay true to themselves, they would still have to face a bunch of terrifying monsters. Besides, the gray mist itself can deceive people, and it can arouse greed in the depths of human nature. Even one of the supreme powers back then was not spared, so what hope does the average person have? Said the old man in white. The old man in black looked up at the sky and said worriedly, the sky has become gray. It was not just him who noticed it. The blue sky above the entire Origins realm had turned gray. Even the white clouds had been dyed gray. As a matter of fact, the shade of gray was getting darker and darker by the second. All these signified that the entire Origins realm was going through an upheaval of mammoth proportions. Sect Master, what should we do? This kind of catastrophe is beyond our abilities to contain, said the old man in black with a shaky voice. We mustn't absorb the gray mist, said the old man in white firmly, his white robes flapping in the wind. He looked up at the sky and murmured, the supreme powers of the past once prophesied that he will return and wipe out the unknown. Where is he now that the unknown has reared its head again? Does he even exist? Suddenly, a golden light beam penetrated the dark clouds, shining down from the sky like a sun. Then, a mysterious aura emerged between heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the golden light became brighter and brighter as it slashed the gray mist like a sword. The pupils of the old man in black shrank rapidly. He kept staring at the golden light and exclaimed, Is that an arrow? Where did the arrow come from? The sky was split in two before it even arrived. The old man in white shivered and said excitedly, this power might just be able to drive away the unknown. Could the prophecy be true? The golden arrow was flying across the entire Origins realm at an astonishing speed which many found unbelievable because the Origins realm was so big that it could be said to be boundless. However, that was exactly what the arrow did, traveling to every place in the Origins realm with its seemingly endless power, all the while ripping the gray mist apart like it was nothing. Then, natural sunlight could be seen shining on the ground again. Chapter 838 The Complete Collection of Archery Skills. The unknown gray mist that enveloped the entire Origins realm was quickly melting away like snow under the sun. Then, the sky became clear and blue again. The two old men, who were still standing on the rooftop, were unfazed by their inability to do anything. Instead, their wrinkled faces broke out in huge grins. Ha ha ha, it seems like what was written in the ancestors' records is indeed correct. There really is a power in this world that can drive away the unknown, said the old man in white excitedly. The old man in black stroked his beard and kept nodding. That was a close call. The spiritual chi would have been contaminated with the unknown if the gray mist had its way. By then, we would have been forced to absorb the unknown. Anyone with foresight would understand it was not worth having an increase in power if it meant that sooner or later, they would lose themselves. It was better to resist greed and take the slow road of cultivation without the unknown grey mist. Nothing's ever absolute. Even this unknown catastrophe. We'll just have to suppress it like we did countless years ago. The eyes of the old man in white suddenly glinted. Then, he activated his mana. His voice reverberated across the mountain as he said, "Listen up, everyone. You are to kill any cultivator you come across who is cultivating with the grey mist. In addition, you are to pass on the message that from today, the Divine Sword sect will open the Sword Tomb to anyone who wishes to receive a sword of their own." Immediately, an uproar swept across every disciple of the Divine Sword sect. Is the sect master really going to open up the Sword Tomb? Wow. I never thought that the sect master would go to such lengths. I've been in the sect for 36,000 years and I've never stepped into the Sword Tomb before. This is good news indeed. I must go and get myself a divine sword. I wonder what could have possibly made the sect master resort to such drastic measures? Everywhere else in the Origins realm, every cultivator and mortal was looking up at the sky with shock and goosebumps all over their bodies. I can see the sun again. And the sky's blue again. The grey mist has disappeared. Just what exactly is that golden light? It was so unbelievable. It must be a power that can change the world. Who could have possibly wielded such power? Just what exactly is that grey mist, and not to mention, that golden light? What secrets are being hidden from us? To be honest, it would take endless time to travel across the entire Origins realm, and yet, the golden light and the grey mist did it within a blink of an eye. It's mind-blowing to think about it. It was a battle between two terrifying existences. Fortunately, the grey mist has been purified. I feel invigorated again. The golden light must be a light of hope. There's still hope for us yet. Everyone could sense the horror of the grey mist when it shrouded the entire Origins realm. First, there was the extremely oppressive atmosphere that brought up people's suppressed emotions, making people restless. Then, there was the fact that the sudden increase in power had driven cultivators into madness, and this inevitably led to a large number of indiscriminate massacres. Lastly, many cultivators could only watch helplessly as the other cultivators transformed into white-haired monsters before their eyes. Both cultivators and mortals fell into an abyss of despair. The existence of the grey mist meant that the world was being dominated by negative emotions, and it did not require a genius to tell them how terrifying a world like that would be. That was why the golden arrow had brought so much hope for them, for it was the golden arrow that gave them back their clear, blue skies. Back where the volcanoes were, the monstrous aura was gradually calming down. The old man smiled coldly at the black dragon with wings and said, "Weren't you acting cocky just now? Why does it seem like you're afraid of even taking a step toward me now?" The black dragon remained where the volcanoes were. He looked up to the sky in shock and said, "This is impossible. This aura should have disappeared without a trace countless years ago. Why is it back now?" "Ha ha ha, nothing's impossible. If you can return, he can return, too," said the old man. "You're bluffing. The laws of heaven have changed. What's gone can never come back, including him," said the black dragon stubbornly. "Then, do you dare to take a step?" mocked the old man. The black dragon stared at the old man vehemently and after a second or so, turned and left. "I've waited countless years, so I can wait longer if need be. Just you wait, the new era will definitely come. Then, you stubborn guardians will all be annihilated." As it went away, the volcanoes that spewed the unknown grey mist gradually subsided. Back at the seaside, the drunkard held the wine gourd high as he poured the wine into his mouth. He then laughed and said, "Ha ha ha. Finally, my wine is safe now that this area has been purified." He drank like it was nobody's business and completely ignored the monstrous waves in front of him. The figure in the sea looked at him with a myriad of expressions flashing across his face. "Fighting against us will not end well. A little longer and no one will be able to stop us," said the figure sinisterly before he disappeared into the sea. At that moment, the four-part architecture was as peaceful as ever. Lin Yanfen slowly put the bow down and praised, "This bow isn't only striking in appearance, it's also of excellent quality. It's really a good bow." In actual fact, he did not equip the bow with an arrow when he pulled the bowstring earlier, for he merely wanted to try to see what it would feel like. The sound of the bowstring humming was very pleasing to the ear and it was obvious that it was made from the finest material. It was only at that moment that Jaji and the others woke up from their trance. However, their heart was still thumping wildly against their chests. The moment the bowstring was released, they clearly felt that time and space had frozen, as if the world could not bear the power and chose to give up operating for a moment. They did not know what effect the golden light arrow would bring to the world, but they could take a vague guess that it would be awesome. Nanan's eyes were sparkling as she excitedly said, "Brother Lee. You looked so awesome. I want to learn archery, too. Can you please teach me?" Li Nianfan laughed gloatingly and said, "Ha ha ha, no problem." He was a professional in archery. Although he could not cast ultimate spells, he was confident that his archery skills could make up for it. He went into the utility room, which was less messy than before after having cleared some things, and soon came back with a book in his hand. He casually threw the book at Nanan and with a smile, he said, "This is the complete collection of archery skills. You can do some self-study first." "Thanks, Brother Lee. You're the best," said Nanan, who then flipped open the book eagerly. Suddenly, her eyes became as big as saucers. In her eyes, the pictures in the book seemed to come alive and a wave of terrifying aura gushed out at her face. The heaven and earth would be the bow, and wisdom the arrows. Unstoppable and invincible. Reading the first page alone made her blood surge. The sharpness and murderous aura contained in it made it unbearable for her to continue, so she hurriedly closed the book. This is clearly the path to attaining supreme mastery in archery. Is Brother Lee asking me to bring the fallen god bow to its former glory? Chapter 839 The Expert's Order. Dragon was not very interested in archery. At that moment, her focus was solely on food. "Brother Lee, what's for lunch?" Li Nianfan smiled slightly and said, "Let's roll some meat." Roll meat? Everyone's eyes lit up at the thought of having some delicious meat skewers. Nanan instantly threw the complete collection of archery skills to a side and wiped away the drool coming out of the corner of her mouth. They had been with Li Nianfan long enough to know what rolling meat meant. Eating meat from skewers elicited a different feel compared to eating the usual home-cooked dishes. The taste was completely different, and because they did not get to eat it often, they always looked forward to the next session. "Come on, let's all work together. Start the fire, set up the grill, and string the meat together with the bamboo skewer. We'll make a feast out of it with some wine." They still had a stockpile of the various game meat from before. It would be a waste if they did not use them for meat skewers. It would be an unbelievably decadent feast. Any one of the meat would have fetched a sky-high price if it was sold in his previous life. "I want to eat the black beef. I'm sure it'll be delicious as a meat skewer. That divine bird's so pretty. Its meat must be very tender. Dibs on the drumstick. I'm going to try grilling the dragon horns on that giant tiger to see what it tastes like. Woof. Woof. I want to eat grilled deer's tail." They rushed to the refrigerator one by one and began to choose their choice of meat from the dazzling selection, just like how Li Nianfan did in his previous life when he went to meat skewer restaurants. They kept gulping as they struggled to choose from the options, and watching this scene being played out filled Li Nianfan with indescribable happiness and contentment. He suddenly smiled, and said, "Let me tell you all a secret. You can also make skewers out of other ingredients like banana, sweet potatoes, eggplants, chives, just about anything. And it tastes even better than meat." "Really? I'll go harvest the Chinese cabbages, then. I'm going to harvest the mushrooms. I'm going to harvest the ginseng. I'm going to harvest the potatoes." An odd expression flashed across Li Nianfan's face. He was sure that they had mixed in something that would not work as a skewer. Wisps of smoke slowly rose from the charcoal fire, making the yard warm and lively. Everyone was enjoying their food and it felt like they were in their own bubble of happiness. The Heavenly Palace people, who were still outside of the four-part architecture, were slowly snapping out of the trance of seeing the powerful arrow earlier. Their noses twitched at the same time and they were immediately intoxicated by the delicious aroma wafting from the yard. "Oh my God, it smells so good. They must be pigging out on something delicious again. I've never smelled anything more delicious in my life. A single sniff is equivalent to a day of cultivation. I love it. The expert's place remains as peaceful as ever no matter how the world outside rages on. I guess that's to be expected when one is a big shot like him. I finally understand why the demons like to stay here on the mountain. Just by smelling the aroma of the food, listening to the music, picking up trash. All these are the kind of good fortune that countless people can't even imagine." The arrow just now must have landed on the unknown grey mist in the Origins realm. "Yang Jing, bring some men with you to go investigate." Sniff. Sniff. "Why me? I want to stay here and smell the aroma of the food." "Xiao Changfeng, you go." "No, I want to stay here, too." This smell is so addictive. Sniff, sniff. Suddenly, their faces turned green at the same time. Their expressions became distorted, and they were clutching at their necks as smoke came out of every orifice. They had breathed in too hard, and mixed in with the fragrant aroma was something very stinky. The sudden extreme contrast made their stomachs churn and their faces green. At that moment, the elite king and Su Chen came over with the manure buckets in their hands. "We've made it just in time to breathe in the delicious cooking of the expert," said the elite king happily. "Yeah, it smells more fragrant than usual. They must be eating something really special in there," said Su Chen with a nod. Then, they plopped both the manure buckets and their butts on the ground and began to immerse themselves in the delicious aroma. The Heavenly Palace people looked at the manure buckets, and their mouths began to twitch. "I get it that the two of you want to smell the aroma, too, but why bring the manure buckets with you? Not to mention, it takes a special kind of genius to enjoy the aroma under these circumstances. Damn it! Are you doing this on purpose? Do you put the manure bucket on the table while you eat?" reprimanded Xiao Chengfeng, not holding back his anger. "The fact that you're so irritable means that you still have a long way to go in your cultivation. As long as your heart's quiet enough, you'd automatically filter out the odor and smell the fragrance," said the elite king solemnly. "Bullshit. It's because you're used to the smell that you can say that. It doesn't have one bit to do with the level of cultivation at all," said Xiao Chengfeng. "All right, you caught us red-handed. You're right, we're doing this on purpose," said the elite king. Then, both he and Su Chen burst out in gleeful laughter. "Ha ha ha. Ah, I feel so much better now. How do you like the mini experience of being a gong farmer? Forgive us, everyone. Being a gong farmer can be boring sometimes, so we decided to have a little fun with you guys. I hope you don't take any offense. In fact, despite its stinkiness, it's actually good for the body. Here, you can have these manure rags so that you can get used to the smell faster. That way, you won't be affected by the smell the next time you're here." The incessant teasing came from the lips of the elite king and Su Chen, making the hair on the Heavenly Palace people's skin stand. Angered, they each took out their treasures. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Don't forget that I have a manure bucket filled to the brim with me," warned the elite king. The Heavenly Palace people froze instantly. How would they ever make it up to the expert should anything happen to the precious contents in the manure bucket? "You sons of beaches," said Cultivator Junjun, which was surprising because he never ever cussed before. Yang Jing looked at the rag and asked, "Are those rags given by the expert as well?" The elite king smiled and nodded. "Yeah, how about it? Don't ever say that I'm not good to you." All those rags were discarded by Li Nianfan, so the elite king did not particularly mind using them to clean the manure buckets. The Heavenly Palace people looked at the rags, and after a while, finally accepted them. Anything from the expert was a treasure in itself, no matter how stinky it was. That's the perk of staying so close to the expert. One can always come across opportunities like this, said Xiao Chengfeng all saltily. Suddenly, a chicken flew up the four-part architecture's wall and clucked at them. They immediately greeted it politely, "Hello, Taoist chicken." The chicken belonged to the expert, so it would not be good for them to offend it. Cultivator Junjun suddenly thought of something and asked excitedly, "Taoist chicken, are you here to give us the expert's orders?" It seemed like the chicken had replaced the use of a dove to send messages. The chicken nodded, stretched out its neck, and said, "The gray mist is of immense use to the expert. You're to collect more and bring it here." Chapter 840 The Gray Mist's Power of Influence. The Heavenly Palace people's faces immediately became solemn when they received the order. They then bid the elite king and Su Chen farewell before they rushed to complete their new mission. Once they were back in the Origin's realm, they were surprised to see that the unknown gray mist was gone. Have we come to the right place? Where's all the unknown gray mist? The upheavals? The terrifying auras? I was expecting a little more chaos than this. Why did things suddenly go back to normal? Cultivator Junjun and the others clearly remembered what state the Origin's realm was in before they went back to the ancient forbidden area. It had not even been half a day before they returned and all the unknown gray mist was gone? Was someone playing a trick on them? "It must be because of the arrow shot by the expert," said Goddess Nuwa in a flurry. Cultivator Junjun nodded and said, "Yes, that's right. The power of the expert's arrow is simply ancient, and since he was the one that shot the arrow, it naturally suppressed the unknown. It turns out everything was under his control after all. A single arrow to calm the turmoil. This is certainly the expert's style. It's a shame we didn't get to see it with our own eyes," said Xiao Chengfeng in awe. "Now that the expert has suppressed the unknown, all that's left for us to do is to collect the gray mist. We must take this opportunity to make sure that it's all cleared up," said Yang Jing. Everybody nodded their heads firmly and immediately got to work. However, it was not easy to find the gray mist since it had retreated, so they asked the heavenly soldiers to inquire about its whereabouts while they went to the Yun clan to see if they could dig up any information from them. The Yun clan had just experienced the calamity of the ancestral land and were recuperating, but they got up immediately when they saw the heavenly palace people. "Fellow Taoists, the arrow that ripped through the sky. Was it the expert's doing?" asked the Yun chief, all red in the face. His voice was trembling with respect. Yang Jing nodded cautiously and said in a low voice, "Keep this matter between yourselves. The expert's trying to cover his tracks from his opponents." The Yun chief, whose body was trembling uncontrollably with excitement, nodded vigorously and said, "Yes, of course. My lips are sealed." He was so overcome with emotion that there were even tears pooling up in his eyes. Xiao Chengfeng was stunned and could not help but ask, "Why are you crying? Did something else happen while we were gone?" "Wow, he's even better than us at bootlicking. He was touched just by receiving a crumb of news about the expert. I've never seen such a pro. He's a formidable rival, all right." The Yun chief wiped away his tears and said, "To be honest, our master has never mentioned that he was training under an absolute power. Even though I've never seen him, I can feel the respect that our master has for him. The recent catastrophe gave me a feeling that the absolute power has returned. That's why I was so excited." The supreme powers were actually training under an absolute power? Thought the heavenly palace people with shock. Then, they recalled that the gravekeeper saying he had returned. They were right to guess that the expert was the one who suppressed the unknown in the past. He was just continuing the battle at that moment. "I'm sure the expert will be able to completely erase the unknown for good since he has our assistance this time," said Xiao Chengfeng staunchly. "Chief Yunkan, we're on a mission to collect the unknown gray mist. Do you have any idea how we can find it?" asked Cultivator Junjun. "Simple. Although the expert has managed to force the unknown gray mist into retreat, those who have been contaminated with it would sooner or later rear their heads again. By then, you'd only have to capture it," said the Yun chief. Goddess Nuwa furrowed her brows and said a little grudgingly, "That means we can only wait for them to show themselves?" "Not exactly. When the unknown gray mist broke out, I noted down the places where it was the thickest. The nearest place is southwest from here," said the Yun chief with a smile. "The thicker the unknown gray mist, the easier it would be to find its trace." "Southwest, you say? Okay, we'll go check it out right now," said Cultivator Junjun, and the Heavenly Palace people immediately left in that direction. Although just a small sect, the Ethereal sect was renowned for its peaceful outlook and regarded as one of the powerhouses in the area. The disciples spent their days cultivating ethereal artistic conception and lived a free and idle life when they were not cultivating. The sect master, Bei Yunchang, was at the peak of being a second-step wisdom elite, not weak by any count. Still, the ethereal sect fell into a catastrophe shortly after the eruption of the unknown gray mist. At that moment, the scent of death permeated the air in the square before the main hall was stained red with the deluge of blood raining from above. The disciples were battling each other. A disciple dressed in the ethereal sect's uniform strode into the hall domineeringly. He kept his gaze fixed on the old man in the center of the hall and said in a low voice, "Master, things wouldn't have turned out like this if you had handed over the ethereal sutra when I asked for it." He was the ethereal sect's most senior disciple, Song Ming. Bei Yunchang's pupils shrank slightly when he noticed the gray mist in Song Ming's eyes. "You're cultivating with the help of that unknown gray mist? How else could I have gotten this sudden increase in power?" asked Song Ming with a smirk. "You B-starred disciple. How many times have I told you that you need to stay vigilant on the path of immortal cultivation? How can you absorb the gray mist when there's obviously something evil behind it? You're the one who forced me into doing that. I wouldn't have to risk absorbing the gray mist if you had just handed over the ethereal sutra to me. This is all your fault. Hand over the ethereal sutra now," said Song Ming savagely. Bei Yunchang closed his eyes as if he was in pain. He sighed and said, "The disciples outside who had revolted with you, did they absorb the gray mist, too?" Song Ming laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, who doesn't like power? This world has always been built on the strong eating the weak. Weakness is sin, and sinners must pay with their lives." Bei Yunchang walked forward slowly with his hands folded behind his back. His aura was flowing. "You must be delusional to think I'd hand over the ethereal sutra to you now. Those who have absorbed the unknown gray mist, step out this instance. I'm going to wipe out each and every one of you from the sect today." His eyes swept across the hall and his aura became stronger and stronger, displaying his unquestionable authority as a sect master. The disciples who were standing on his right raised their swords, and so did the disciples on the left. The dozen or so disciples who could be in this hall were all talented inner disciples, but at that moment, they all raised their long swords toward Bai Yunchang. Bai Yunchang's aura that was still rising suddenly halted and the expression on his face was no longer calm but a little dazed. "All the disciples I'm proud of are revolting against me?" The situation outside was not optimistic as well. A rough count put the estimation of the disciples who had absorbed the unknown gray mist at 80%. Because of that, their spiritual cultivation had received a huge boost. Bai Yunchang's heart slowly sank. "There's no way I can win against a force like this." Chapter 841 Xiao Chengfeng, the dedicated model worker. The entire sect was eroded by greed. 80% of the disciples rebelled against the sect master while the other disciples had already been slaughtered, all for the sake of the ethereal sutra. "Master, you have to get with the times. Now hand over the ethereal sutra and we'll grant you a quick death," said Song Ming with a smirk. "Master, the mirage is approaching. We can't stay here any longer. It's better to hand over the ethereal sutra and disband as soon as possible," said another disciple. He. Bai Yunchang was at a loss of what to do and could only smile bleakly. The situation he was in right now was even worse than the destruction of the sect. However, if anything else, he still had his backbone. "You'll never get your hands on the ethereal sutra. Die, you stubborn old man," shouted Song Ming as he immediately charged toward Bai Yunchang with his mana activated. The other disciples followed suit. White sword chi flowed out of their swords and transformed into a terrifying sword net that trapped Bai Yunchang in it. Bai Yunchang used a particular footwork from the ethereal sutra, making his figure a blur. The sword chi he cast was so sharp that it could neutralize 10 opponents' sword chi. In an instant, the entire hall was riddled with holes from the overflowing sword chi. However, the disciples' powers had skyrocketed. They left behind the bonds between master and disciple and soon suppressed Bai Yunchang, leaving several sword wounds on his body. Song Ming's pupils turned gray and he said coldly, "The new era is coming and pedantic people are destined to be eliminated by this era. Master, it's not that you didn't choose the gray mist. You were actually abandoned by it." Bai Yunchang shook his head and sighed. "You've gone crazy." "Ha ha ha, you can't live without being crazy." Song Ming laughed wildly. The other disciples also laughed maniacally as their attacks became stronger. "We, the disciples of the ethereal sect, invite you to die together, Master," they shouted in unison. They raised their swords high and the sword light converged in the void, transforming into their strongest attack. A giant sword phantom slashed down on Bai Yunchang. Under this attack, Bai Yunchang's mana was cut off and he was about to die under the sword light. At that moment, a majestic aura blasted into the hall from the outside like a gust of wind. "Disciples teaming up to off the master? What a classic show. Disciples like you aren't worthy of wielding a sword." The man's voice resounded in everyone's ears like thunder. Then, with a soft whistle, a sword light flashed past, blinding everyone. The giant sword phantom was instantly blasted away and the disciples' swords fell to the ground as they were sent flying until they, too, landed on the ground. Xiao Chengfeng walked into the hall slowly with his hands folded behind his back. The swords scattered on the ground shook as if welcoming their king. His entrance was indeed awesome. "Who are you?" asked Song Ming in a voice trembling with fear. "Who am I?" Xiao Chengfeng smiled coldly and said, "God wouldn't accept the birth of Xiao Chengfeng, but my sword cultivation's still historical like the long night. Senior Xiao, we hold no grievances toward each other and this is the ethereal sect's business. Why are you intervening?" asked Song Ming grudgingly. "You've been bewitched by the unknown gray mist and turned to evil, so it's only natural for me to get rid of all evil," said Xiao Chengfeng coldly. Behind him, the heavenly palace people finally arrived. "Xiao Chengfeng, stop trying to act cool. I saw you repeating the lines to yourself over and over again on our way here. Aren't you tired of the same old lines? Maybe it's time to come up with a new one?" teased Yang Jing. "This is the 16th time. We're all tired of hearing it," said Juling Shen. "Hey, what I'm doing is for the good of the heavenly palace's reputation. In fact, I'm the most dedicated one out of all of us here," retorted Xiao Chengfeng. Their arrival froze the air in the ethereal sect. Although they did not deliberately exude auras, The occasional oppressive power still made them feel suffocated. Bai Yunchang's scalp was crawling with fright. He did not expect so many big shots would suddenly appear just as the sect was about to perish. Greetings, seniors. I, Bai Yunchang, thank you all for saving my life, said Bai Yunchang respectfully. You are welcome. Xiao Changfeng smiled and waved his hand dismissively. Do you mind if we help you clear out the disciples? Please, go ahead, seniors. Immediately, Xiao Changfeng waved his hand and the swords on the ground rose into the air one after another. Then, they stabbed the disciples. Cultivator Junjun took out a crystal ball that extracted all the unknown grey mist absorbed by those disciples. Then, it was all sealed into the ball. He shook his head and said, "This isn't much, but I guess it's better than nothing." At that moment, 3 disciples entered the hall and greeted Bai Yunchang, "Master." "Anyone else alive?" asked Bai Yunchang. "There are 3 junior brothers who have been seriously injured and are being treated outside," answered one of the disciples. Bai Yunchang let out a long sigh, his face deep with sorrow. It was a sad thing to know that only a few people survived in such a huge sect. You should count yourselves lucky. Along the way here, we've seen fathers and sons cannibalizing each other, husbands and wives turning against each other, and many sects that have been destroyed, comforted Yang Jing. Juling Shen nodded and said, "Some sects were completely wiped out by us because the whole sect was under the influence of the unknown grey mist. It's very impressive how your sect has a lot of disciples who can resist the grey mist's temptation." They were not pulling words out of thin air and were merely recounting what they saw and heard along the way. Although the unknown grey mist erupted for just a short time, it still managed to wreak immeasurable havoc. There were too many people who could not resist absorbing the unknown grey mist. What followed was hatred, jealousy, greed, violence. The emotions that were hidden in the bottom of their hearts were magnified rapidly and their spiritual cultivation skyrocketed due to the unknown grey mist. Wild with ambition, they began to cause trouble everywhere. The chaos made the Heavenly Palace people feel heavy and uneasy. Nevertheless, they strengthened their resolve to completely wipe out the unknown grey mist. They firmly believed that as long as they served the expert well, the final victory would definitely belong to them. I really didn't expect the unknown grey mist to be so terrifying that my disciples would be convinced to turn against me. They weren't like this before. Once again, thank you, seniors, said Bai Yunchang with lingering fear. Don't mention it. We came here specifically to erase the unknown. The grey mist near this sect is more intense. Do you know what is in the southwest direction? Asked Yang Jing. In the southwest direction? Bai Yunchang's face changed slightly as he said, if my guess is right, the unknown grey mist you're looking for must be related to the mirage. Mirage? Bai Yunchang began to explain, there's a valley in the southwest called the Misty Valley, a dangerous spot. Anyone who enters the valley will be affected by the fog, making it hard for them to know which direction they're going in. Ultimately, their consciousness will be blinded with illusions. Even a first-step wisdom elite would find it difficult to get out of there. Originally, everyone thought the valley was just an ordinary dangerous spot. However, just a few days ago, the outbreak of an unknown grey mist had brought a terrifying existence out of its slumber. I also heard people say that there was an ancient mirage dragon entrenched in that valley and that it had been sleeping until the grey fog came. The fog was made up of the mirages that the mirage dragon puffed out, thus, forming the Misty Valley. Chapter 842 The Powerhouse's Plan. Ancient Mirage Dragon? The Heavenly Palace people exchanged glances with each other. They were not familiar with the creature, but if it could form a dangerous spot while in its slumber just by breathing, then even a first-step wisdom elite would think twice before crossing it. Since the Mirage Dragon was awakened by the appearance of the unknown grey mist, it's likely the reason why the unknown grey mist is thicker here, said Yang Jing in a low voice. Cultivator Junjun frowned and said, I wonder what level the Mirage Dragon is. Seniors, people have gone to investigate the Misty Valley before when the Mirage Dragon was still in its slumber. Mirages would play in their minds all the time. A Chaos Daluo Golden Immortal could only last a maximum of 2 hours there. After that, he'd forever be trapped there. A first-step wisdom elite could last for 10 hours. Any longer than that, he'd be trapped in his fantasy forever, too, said Bai Yunchang. Does that mean the Mirage Dragon can control people's minds? Asked Xiao Chengfeng with shock. Bai Yunchang nodded and said, yes, now that the Mirage Dragon's awake, the power of the fog is even greater and it's rapidly spreading. The ethereal sect was making preparations for the move before all this happened. Cultivator Junjun arched his brow and said, "The fog is spreading? It seems like the Mirage Dragon definitely has something to do with the gray mist. It has just woken up and is at its most violent state. This will allow the mirage to spread." Seniors, there's also a sect called the Cloud Pavilion in the southwest which is the top powerhouse in this area. The sect master and deputy sect master are both third step wisdom elites, but no one has been able to come out since the Cloud Pavilion was swallowed by the fog, said Bei Yun Chang. He was trying to warn them just how dangerous the place was. He did not want the people who saved his life to die needlessly. Apart from that, some cultivators who had overestimated their abilities also entered the fog and never came out. The warning was very powerful since even a third step wisdom elite could not get out. However, the Heavenly Palace people were not so easily scared. After they got the information they wanted, they left the ethereal sect and went straight to the Misty Valley on their auspicious cloud. At the same time, a map was spread out in front of everyone. The map was given to them by Bei Yun Chang, and it was the map of the Misty Valley. However, many places on the map were now shrouded in fog. "What do you think?" asked Cultivator Junjun. Looking at the map, the fog used to be confined to this area only, but in the past 5 days, it has spread more than 5 times, which means that the 2 major towns, the 3 major sects, and countless wild creatures are all shrouded. On top of that, no one can break free, replied Yang Jing. If the mirage can really control the mind, then it's completely impossible to escape once someone is under its control. There's only one reason for this phenomenon: the mirage can disorient people and thus, trap them indefinitely, said Goddess Nuwa solemnly. Besides that, there's also an extremely difficult problem. There was distress in Xiao Chengfeng's tone as he sighed. Once you enter the fog, you'll most likely be besieged by the cultivators who have been manipulated by the mirage. If you're under siege, you'd be disoriented by the mirage sooner or later. They analyzed all the horrors of the mirage but could not find corresponding countermeasures. In addition to the problems, there were also some unsolved problems. How were they supposed to find the Mirage Dragon? What level was it at? They were completely clueless about these questions. No matter what, we have to enter the Mirage. This is the only way we can obtain information on how to defeat it, said Yang Jing determinedly. He's right. I may not be as smart as you all, but I'm willing to do anything for the sake of the expert, said Zhuling Shen. Everyone else unanimously agreed with his view. However, they still needed to come up with a plan of action. In the end, it was decided that Yang Jing, Xiao Chengfeng, and Zhuling Shen should enter the Mirage first to test the waters. Everything was finalized and everyone continued on their way. Not long after, a cloud of white fog that looked like thick smoke appeared in front of them. The white fog was like a barrier that was blocking a large area, but it was clearly separated from the boundaries outside the white fog, like 2 worlds. According to the map, the white fog has spread to this location, and the spread is much faster than expected, said Cultivator Junjun gravely. Is this the mirage? I'm curious to know how it'll affect my sanity. Let's hurry in, said Zhuling Shen excitedly. Hold on a minute. Yang Jing shook his head, but he was looking in another direction. There, a group of cultivators was slowly approaching. It was a group of 5 people dressed in different clothes. They did not deliberately conceal the aura on their bodies. 3 third-step wisdom elites and 2 second-step wisdom elites. The old man walking in the center cupped his fist in a salute to the Heavenly Palace people and said with a smile, "Greetings fellow Taoists, I'm Cultivator Zuosi. Did you all come for the unknown grey mist?" "I'm Cultivator Junjun. Are you here for the unknown grey mist, too?" asked Cultivator Junjun with his fist cupped in a salute as well. Cultivator Zuosi nodded and said with a smile, "The birth of the unknown grey mist has birthed countless upheavals. As the source of chaos in the Origins realm, it must be removed." "Your sense of righteousness is commendable," said Yang Jing non-committally. The alarm bells in his brain were ringing a little. The fact that the other party proclaimed such a righteous thing right at the start could either mean he really was a pure-hearted soul or he had ulterior motives. "Well, I have to admit our motives aren't that pure. We're hoping to get something out of this, too," said Cultivator Zuosi as if he had read Yang Jing's mind. "Oh? And what may that be?" asked Yang Jing. "You don't know? Aren't you all here for the same thing?" Cultivator Zuosi did not wait for Yang Jing to reply but continued saying, "The powerhouses in the Origins realm had promised that as long as enough grey mist is captured, it'll be considered a contribution to the world. By doing so, we get to enter their secret border to gain some opportunities." Even some ancient sects that had isolated themselves from the world had sensed the horror of the unknown grey mist and decided to partake in this effort. We'll be able to reach the peak of our power if we can enter their secret border to get the opportunities. With those treasures, spiritual roots, or heirlooms, one can definitely reach the sky in one step. The other powerhouses are also collecting unknown gray mist? The expressions of the Heavenly Palace people changed to shock. No, they're not collecting it. They're going to wipe it out, said Cultivator Zuosi. Who knows if they're actually going to wipe it out or do something else once it's in their hands, thought Cultivator Junjun with a cold smile. How about we team up since you're already planning to enter the mirage? Invited Cultivator Zuosi. Chapter 843, The Robber Getting Robbed. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Team up together? The Heavenly Palace's people's hearts moved slightly as they looked at Cultivator Zuosi and his party who were smiling kindly and sincerely at them. The Heavenly Palace people exchanged glances with each other, and said, "Fine with us. The more of us there are, the safer it'll be." A hint of disappointment flashed in the eyes of Cultivator Zuosi and the others when they learned that Cultivator Junjun, Goddess Nuwa, and the rest would stay behind. Then, the 8 of them entered the mirage together. Everyone felt that they had entered a world where everything became white as soon as they stepped into the mirage. Even with their cultivation, they could only see things within 10 yards. Not only that, their divine consciousness were also restricted. Keep your divine consciousness on you. The most terrifying thing about the mirage is its ability to erode one's divine consciousness. You'll only see a bunch of illusions if your divine consciousness is scattered in the mirage, and this will accelerate the erosion even more, reminded Cultivator Zuosi. You seem to be very knowledgeable about the mirage, Cultivator Zuosi, said Yang Jing. I did some homework on the ancient mirage dragon to better prepare myself, said Cultivator Zuosi with a smile. Yang Jing simply nodded at his reply and turned to look behind. They had not even walked 5 steps from where they entered but the road behind them was already gone. They had a hunch that if they went back to look for the entrance, they would never get out of the mirage. Once in the mirage, the direction will be reversed and it'll be difficult to distinguish left and right. You'll feel as if you're moving forward when you're actually moving backward. It's impossible to get out unless we kill the mirage dragon, explained Cultivator Zuosi. And how do we find the mirage dragon? Asked Xiao Changfeng. Cultivator Zuosi sighed deeply, shook his head, and said, the mirage dragon's cunning and cautious by nature. We can only rely on luck and ability. How long can a 3rd step wisdom elite last in the mirage? Asked Yang Jing with a frown on his face. 10 hours. That's not long at all, said Juling Shen with a shock. This surprised them because Yun Beichong had mentioned that a 1st step wisdom elite could last 10 hours, so a 3rd step wisdom elite should be able to last longer, right? However, after giving it more thought, they did not feel that surprised anymore. The mirage dragon was in a deep sleep before. Now, it had awakened, so the power of the mirage would naturally be much stronger. They chatted a little more while proceeding forward cautiously, their speed slowed down by the mirage. After a while, an ominous feeling struck their hearts and they all stopped in their tracks. Roar. With a low roar, creatures appeared from the fog, one after another. All of them were demons that were controlled by the mirage. At this moment, they had transformed back to their non-human forms. They surrounded the group and were slowly closing in on them. Gathering and ambushing, this doesn't seem like something that can be done by someone who has lost their mind. It should be the mirage dragon manipulating them against us, said Xiao Chengfeng gravely. This meant that the mirage dragon had already noticed them. Yang Jing observed the state of those demons. He then arched his brow and said, among these demons, there are also those that had absorbed the unknown gray mist, which means that the mirage dragon can also control them. The demons did not wait for them to make a move. With a roar, they pounced on Yang Jing and the others. Although they were high in numbers, their power was not strong. They were easily defeated by Yang Jing and the others. Everyone continued to walk in the mirage and along the way, the attacks from the beings who were being manipulated by the mirage came at them non-stop. Their power was getting stronger and stronger, too. Yang Jing and the others could not do anything about it since not a trace of the mirage dragon could be found at all. The situation seemed to get worse and worse with each passing second and 6 hours passed by in a blink of an eye. Their footsteps became slower and slower and there were signs of exhaustion on their faces. The longer they stayed, the more the mirage eroded their divine consciousness, and this was on top of spending effort and energy to suppress the mirage. Cultivator Zuosi, what should we do? Do you know the way out of here? Asked Yang Jing. The look in Cultivator Zuosi's eyes suddenly became sinister as he said coldly, "Of course, and I'll tell you as long as you hand over all your treasures." Without a word, the four others with Cultivator Zuosi moved in a flash, and before Yang Jing and the others knew it, they had surrounded them. "What's the meaning of this?" asked Juling Shen in a low voice. One of them cackled and said, "Idiots. Can't you tell? This is a robbery. Even if we hand over the treasures, there's no guarantee you'd be able to leave the Mirage, so what's the point?" asked Yang Jing calmly. "Ha ha ha. Do you think we're as stupid as you? We've come prepared unlike you," said Cultivator Zuosi. Then, he waved his hand. A golden ancient bell appeared above his head and bursts of ringing followed, forming a sound wave that enveloped him. "There are very few treasures that can be used against the Mirage, but my soul-shocking bell happens to be one of the rare few. It can protect my divine consciousness from being confused by the illusion, allowing me to stay in the Mirage for 5 more hours. As for you all, I purposefully added 2 extra hours to the time limit so that we can kill you by surprise. In fact, a third-step wisdom elite can only last here for 8 hours. Couple that with what you've endured here, you must all be standing on your last leg," gloated Cultivator Zuosi. He was confident that victory was his to take. After all, this was not the first time they had done this. As a matter of fact, Yang Jing and the others were the 4th batch of people they had offered up to the Mirage. He had gotten a lot of treasures by doing this, for even a third-step wisdom elite could do nothing but hand over their treasures if they wanted to get out of the Mirage. That was why he was a little disappointed that Cultivator Junjun and the others did not enter with Yang Jing. "So, you've been keeping guard outside the Mirage to see who would be foolish enough to fall for your trap?" Xiao Changfeng slowly put his hand on the hilt of his sword. He shook his head and said coldly, "I must say, you're even more devious than those who absorbed the unknown grey mist. What kind of twisted mind does one need to have to use the Mirage Dragon as a tool for robbery? Stop talking nonsense and quickly hand over your treasures. Don't tell me you think you can win against us in your current state," urged Cultivator Zuosi coldly. It would be troublesome if those third-step wisdom elites manipulated by the Mirage Dragon were to show up now. "Last question, how do you plan to get out of here?" asked Yang Jing. Cultivator Zuosi did not mind revealing his secret. He smiled and said, "I have a treasure that's strong enough to resist the interference of the Mirage. Although it isn't powerful, it can lock in one direction. The Mirage would confuse one's perception, causing people to stray from a straight path so that they would be going around in circles. Therefore, if they could lock down a direction and keep walking, they would be able to leave." It was these treasures that provided Cultivator Zuosi the conditions to use the Mirage to rob others. The others might have called the place a dangerous spot, but to him, it was paradise. "You think we came unprepared?" asked Yang Jing evenly. Cultivator Zuosi frowned and asked doubtfully, "Isn't that so?" Yang Jing smiled, pointed at them, and said, "Why do we have to prepare when we have you?" Then, his voice turned cold as he said, "Don't move. This is a robbery." Chapter 844, The Refreshing Smell. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. "You want to rob us?" Cultivator Zuosi and the others were taken aback. They were all looking at Yang Jing in disbelief. They thought they had heard wrongly. "Ha! As if. Tunder, where you got your confidence from?" They had mocking smiles. "Are these people stupid? Don't they know that we're the ones who have the upper hand now? You want to fight with us for our treasures in the state you're in? We might have spared your life if you cooperated with us from the start, but now you leave us with no choice but to kill you," said Cultivator Zuosi with a sneer. It would be a miracle if Yang Jing and the others could even exert 30% of their power since their divine consciousness had been eroded by the Mirage. Cultivator Zuosi had the soul-shocking bell. Coupled with the advantage of having more people on his side, Yang Jing and the others had no chance at all. Could they have a treasure that can resist the Mirage as well? Nah, that's impossible, or is it? Cultivator Zuosi's eyes suddenly widened in disbelief as Yang Jing, Xiao Changfeng, and Juling Shen took out some rags. Then, they unwillingly tied them over their noses. Blurg. Xiao Changfeng's face turned green on the spot and he said with disgust, "I can't believe that I'd one day wear this over my face willingly. Blurg, the smell's too strong." Tears were pooling in Juling Shen's eyes, but he said happily, "Yeah, but this really refreshes my divine consciousness. Fortunately, I didn't reject those 2 gong farmers' offer." "How? How's this possible? How can a mere rag help you?" Cultivator Zuosi was shocked to his very core. He did not feel any aura fluctuations from the rags at all. It was clearly not even a treasure. How could it resist the mirage? The stinkier it is, the better it'll work as a mind refresher. Yang Jing held back his urge to retch and remain calm on the surface. You have no idea what you're missing out on. This rag enables us to freely go in and out of the mirage. Even the things discarded by the expert had heaven-defying abilities, making them more and more envious of the two gong farmers. They're bluffing. Let's kill them now, said one of Cultivator Zuosi's men. Yes. With a wave of their hands, 5 sharp daggers appeared out of thin air in an array of golden light. The 5 daggers were a set of ultimate treasures, forming a terrifying formation. The 5 daggers disappeared into the void at the same time. Then, dense silk threads appeared between Yang Jing, Xiao Changfeng, and Julin Shen. They were the trace left by the daggers. The murder sword instantly locked up the space. The formation deployed by 5 4th-grade Wisdom Ultimate Treasures exceeds those of a 6th-grade Wisdom Ultimate Treasure. The fact that it requires 5 people to deploy the formation means that one person alone cannot exert the full power of this formation. This killing formation's really powerful. I don't even think an average 3rd-step Wisdom Elite can survive this. Even though Yang Jing and the others were trapped within the formation, they still found the time to casually analyze their situation. Cultivator Zuosi and his men were strong and their plan was foolproof. They did not let down their guards even when they knew Yang Jing and the others could not exert their full power. Their attitude made Cultivator Zuosi feel insulted. He sneered and said, "So, you think you're not the average 3rd-step Wisdom Elite, eh? Why don't you prove it to me then?" The free space formed by the 5 daggers shrank and the daggers inched them further into the space like a poisonous snake that was invisible to the naked eye. With a flick of his wrist, Yang Jing brought out his 3-pointed double-edged blade at an extremely fast speed, stabbing it directly into the void in front of him at an angle. Xiao Changfeng gave a cold smile as the long sword behind him was unsheathed. The sword light swept down on them like an entire galaxy. Julin Shen roared wildly, holding a double axe in his hand. Instead of retreating, he advanced, slashing fiercely at the daggers. Clang! Clang! All 5 daggers were instantly knocked away. It was as if Yang Jing and the other 2 had woken up like sleeping tigers. Their force exploded, making Cultivator Zuosi and the others unable to breathe. "Are you for real?" Cultivator Zuosi was still in denial. Yang Jing and the 2 others ignored him. With their mana spinning wildly, they charged toward the 3 3rd-step Wisdom Elites respectively. "Sorry to tell you all this but you've messed with the wrong people." Xiao Changfeng laughed as the sword chi around him formed endless waves, shrouding one of the 3rd-step Wisdom Elites with unparalleled force. Cultivator Zuosi's group was made up of 3 3rd-step Wisdom Elites, and 2 2nd-step Wisdom Elites. They had the advantage of numbers and yet, they could do nothing but block the oncoming attacks from Yang Jing, Xiao Changfeng, and Julin Shen. Cultivator Zuosi's heart gradually sank. He initially thought that Yang Jing and the others were bluffing, trying to make a final desperate attempt to save themselves. He had to admit, he was shocked the moment he realized the rags they were wearing could truly resist the mirage. How was it possible for such weird treasures to exist in this world? Heaven's eye of holy light. Yang Jing used his 3-pointed double-edged blade to suppress Cultivator Zuosi, and at the same time, the third eye on his forehead shot out a red ray of light. The blade pierced Cultivator Zuosi's bell first. Then, it pierced directly into his chest, sending him flying upside down to the air. Yang Jing arched his brow and said in surprise, "Huh. He sure has gotten a lot of treasures from his robbery operation." His third eye and bloodline had been upgraded after drinking Li Nianfan's Wolfberry Red Day tea, making it akin to the power of a Wisdom Ultimate spell. Once pierced by the red light, not only would one's physical body be damaged, but the damage to one's primordial spirit would be even greater. However, it was obvious that Cultivator Zuosi had a treasure that could protect his primordial spirit. Otherwise, the blow he received earlier would have diminished all of his fighting power. "You've suspected us from the very beginning?" asked Cultivator Zuosi fearfully while staggering back. He glanced at the other two battles happening not far from him and it made his blood run cold. He never imagined that Yang Jing and the others would be that strong. Their mana, without the baptism of countless heaven and earth treasures, would never reach such a condensed level, and the ultimate spells were also far beyond those of the same level. Surely, they would not have been this strong if it was not for the backing of an existence of extraordinary powers. "We suspected you from the very beginning. Who would be this friendly at the first meeting? It's even more abnormal that all 5 of you showed the same enthusiasm," said Yang Jing with a smile. Just because of that? Asked Cultivator Zuosi, a little peeved. Of course not. Yang Jing shook his head and continued, after entering the mirage, I became more sure of this. There wasn't a single hint of panic in your eyes when we were trapped inside the mirage, even though you tried to act all frantic. I was right to think that you must have a way to get out of the mirage. Now, I'd advise you to hand your treasure over if you want to live. Chapter 845, He was a good guide. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. You want to leave? Dream on. Cultivator Zuosi sneered. Then, countless treasures appeared out of thin air with a wave of his hand. All of the treasures were Defense Ultimate treasures and they had him in a watertight protective circle. He knew he was not their match, and so, he decided to retreat. As a matter of fact, his soul-shocking bell was not even as effective as some old rags, and it would lessen his chance of escaping even further if he dragged the battle on. He had to run. The other four thought the same, too, and were steadily retreating as they battled. The only ending for you is to die here. Brothers, let's get out of here, said Cultivator Zuosi ruthlessly. Immediately, a golden arc appeared under the five of them, and then they shot out an array of light, disappearing into thin air. However, Yang Jing and the others were faster than them. One sword between life and death. Xiao Changfeng laughed and remained standing where he was. Then, he raised his hand and pointed at one of them. His sword flew through the air and in a blink of an eye, appeared in one of the man's chest, piercing right through it. That man's primordial spirit and flesh were being annihilated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even at his last moments, he still could not believe that he was not able to escape Xiao Changfeng's attack, especially when he had so many Defense Ultimate treasures protecting him. Xiao Changfeng moved on to his next target. He pointed at another man and his sword disappeared again. The man was terrified to the extent that he nearly pissed his pants. He was about to dodge the attack when he felt a stabbing pain in his chest. He looked down and saw that Xiao Changfeng's sword was already embedded in his chest. Hey, Xiao Changfeng. Leave some for us, will ya? Said Juling Shen angrily, annoyed that Xiao Changfeng had stolen his limelight. His body expanded and his axe fell on the rest of the men from a great height, almost like a comet falling on them. Even before the axe landed on them, Cultivator Zuosi and his two men could already feel the drowning force of the axe's momentum. Powerful mana poured down from the axe and shrouded Cultivator Zuosi and the others, causing their treasures to flicker and cutting off their path of escape. This guy's way too strong. Where did this group of people come from? All of them are invincible. It's too scary. The regret in their hearts was indescribable. They wished they had never come across Xiao Changfeng and the others. They had no one else to blame but their own rotten luck. Suddenly, in the depths of the mirage, a terrifying aura appeared, causing everyone's hearts to skip a beat. Yang Jing arched his brow and said gloomily, 5 third-step wisdom elites are coming and they all seem to be under the control of the mirage. Cultivator Zuosi was ecstatic, for the more chaotic the situation was, the easier it was for him to escape. Let's escape separately, he shouted. Then, he rushed in the direction of a third-step wisdom elite without looking back. The faces of the other two were instantly gloomy. They had been abandoned by Cultivator Zuosi, for he was the only one with the treasures that could help them get out. He, what an idiot, said Xiao Changfeng. He, Yang Jing, and Juling Shen gave up chasing the remaining two men and chased after Cultivator Zuosi together. They had only one goal in mind, and that was to get their hands on the treasures that could point the way out of the mirage. It might have taken Yang Jing and the others more effort to capture Cultivator Zuosi and his brothers if they had stayed together. In fact, they might even have lasted until the group of third-step wisdom elites reached them. Therefore, they could not help but think that Cultivator Zuosi was courting his own death by escaping alone. The same realization must have dawned on him, for a look of despair flashed across his eyes when he saw Yang Jing and the others coming for him. Second brother, third brother, I wasn't right in my mind just now. Only by sticking together do we have a chance of surviving. Help me! Screamed Cultivator Zuosi hysterically. Too late. Xiao Changfeng and the others smirked as the distance between them and Cultivator Zuosi was rapidly shortening. Even if his brothers wanted to rescue him, it was too late. Cultivator Zuosi could not even win against one of them, let alone 3 of them working together. Within 3 seconds, his body and spirit were completely destroyed. Let's go. Yang Jing took away all of Cultivator Zuosi's items. Together with Xiao Changfeng and Juling Shen, they went in search of the treasure that could guide them out of the mirage. After a while, They broke through the siege of the group of third-step wisdom elites, and there was a golden pointer in front of them, directing them out of the mirage. As for Cultivator Zuosi's two brothers, they were not so lucky. It was only a matter of time before they fell under the control of the mirage. Yang Jing and the others were very fast, and the people who were manipulated by the mirage could not keep up with them at all. Within 5 minutes, they found their way out of the mirage. Cultivator Junjun and the others were still standing in the same spot. When they saw Yang Jing and the others come out, their expressions relaxed and they smiled. However, they retreated with a disgusted look on their faces the moment they took a step toward them. "I didn't expect this mirage to be so weird. It's terrifying how you all came out with a new fetish," said Tong Tian with shock. Yang Jing and the others froze and quickly took off the rags that were covering their faces. They explained helplessly, "Don't get me wrong, this is a treasure that can resist the mirage. I wouldn't have used it if I had a choice." "Didn't expect you to come out so soon. I take it the trip went well?" asked Goddess Nua with a smile. "We were lucky to bump into Cultivator Zuosi and the others. It really saved us a lot of trouble." Cultivator Junjun laughed and said, "I guessed right. They've been keeping watch over this place to see who would fall for their trap. I sensed there was a high probability that they had a way to get out of the mirage." "He was a good guide," said Xiao Chengfeng sincerely. Cultivator Junjun's face turned solemn and he asked, "What's it like in the mirage?" Yang Jing shook his head slightly and replied, "It's hard to say, the mirage was so thick that we couldn't even see our hands that were right in front of us. Moreover, we had to deal with beings who fell under the control of the mirage. I know for sure there are 5 of them. No, 7 of them who are three-step wisdom elites." "Meaning to say that you didn't come across the mirage dragon at all?" asked Cultivator Junjun. "No. That's odd. Why didn't the mirage dragon come out?" Everyone was thinking the same thing. How could the mirage dragon, who had already woken up from its slumber, tolerate any outsiders stepping into its territory? It was only logical to think that it would have done something to wipe them out. They might not have found it as odd if the mirage dragon let intruders slide once or twice, but Cultivator Zuosi and his brothers had gone in and out so many times. Yet, there was still no trace of the mirage dragon. After entering the mirage dragon never showed up. It only manipulated those under his control to deal with the intruders. This is completely different from the usual behavior of demons. "There must be a reason," mused Yang Jing. "The reason the mirage dragon didn't appear is probably because its strongest attack comes from using the mirage. He's probably quite weak physically," added Goddess Nua. Xiao Chengfeng's eyes suddenly lit up and he said, "In other words, we can kill it as long as we have a way to find its body in the mirage. There's no need to worry if it will fall under the control of the mirage when we have them in your rags. That means we just need to find a way to deal with the people who've been manipulated by the mirage," said Yang Jing with a smile. Cultivator Junjun looked at the rag and suddenly said, "I think we can do this."